Welcome to my channel. In my channel, you can watch various type of fiction and fantasy audiobook. If you want more video like this, please subscribe my channel.
I reincarnated as Marvel's Sentinel with insane stats. Part 1. Han Yu was woken up by his own vomiting. Acidic fluid choked his nasal cavity, and the pungent smell of disinfectant pressed down on him again, his stomach twisted into a knot. He tried to turn over, but his wrists were yanked back by something, the metal rings clamped onto his skin, cold and numbing. 3 electrodes were stuck to his chest, thin wires trailing from his ribs, and his ankles were also locked, with dried, dark red marks beside the shackles. He squeezed a half-stifled, hoarse sound from his throat. What kind of joke is this? There was no response. The metal lamp overhead was blindingly white, casting a bloody hue beneath his eyelids. Han Yu closed his eyes for 2 seconds, then snapped them open again. His left hand went to touch his face, his fingertips brushing against his cheekbones, jaw, and bridge of his nose. The sensation was so unfamiliar that his fingers froze. This face was younger, the contours still his, but it felt as if tiny wires of fire were buried beneath the skin, burrowing from his temples all the way into the back of his head. He looked down at his wrists. The wrist bones were harder than in his memories, there were needle marks on his skin, and a sticker with a serial number was stuck to the inside of his forearm, its edges curled from being soaked in sweat. A19. Han Yu tugged at the corners of his mouth, but couldn't manage a smile. He dug his nails into his palms, pain. Then he bit his tongue, even more pain. The metallic taste of blood surged up, overpowering the acidic stench in his stomach. The glass wall opposite reflected the hospital bed, the restraint frame, the IV drip, and his own pale face. He stared for 3 seconds, and his fingertips began to tremble. Subject A19. The speaker in the corner of the ceiling crackled with static, followed by a man's voice in English. Adult Compound V Protocol, failed batch. Increase neurosuppression by 0.3. Compound V, failed batch. Han Yu's back pressed against the cold mattress, and sweat broke out instantly. His mind was a chaotic mess. Marvel Universe, Robert Reynolds, Sentinel, Shadow, these words felt like they had been forcibly shoved into his skull, rolling and colliding with each other. The next second, the blue and white logo of VOD International flashed past the observation window, smashing those fragments to pieces. VOD, the boys. He swallowed a mouthful of blood-tinged saliva and forced himself to look around. On the IV stand to his left hung a transparent bag, the edge of the label reading, Compound V Derivative. On the cart to his right lay sedative syringes, blood collection vials, and disposable gloves. At the foot of the bed was a black box, with cables connecting to the neural suppression rings on his wrists and ankles. He tried to lift his hand. Crack, an electric current drilled from the wrist ring into his bones, and his arm muscles tensed instantly. Han Yu's teeth slammed together, his spine arched, and he forced a short, stifled groan from his throat. It hurt too much to even dream. A crashing sound suddenly came from next door. Han Yu turned his head. Through another sheet of semi-transparent glass, a man was strapped to a hospital bed, his body convulsing like a fish out of water. The man's skin began to split open from his neck, black-red veins crawling up his face, foam spraying from his mouth, his eyeballs bloodshot, his fingernails scraping a harsh, grating sound against the steel bed frame. Stabilizer failed. Move him. The door opened, and 2 people in hazmat suits pushed a mobile gurney inside. Their movements were practiced. They first pinned the man's shoulders, then administered another injection to the side of his neck. The man was still convulsing, his arms bursting through the restraints, black-red liquid seeping from the splits in his flesh. Shit, don't let him splatter on me. Drag him out, the furnace is empty. Han Yu's Adam's apple bobbed. The man was dragged off the bed, his heels trailing across the floor, leaving a half-palm-wide streak of black-red. Before the glass door closed, the man's face was pressed against the floor tiles, his eyes locked onto Han Yu, his mouth opening and closing twice, unable to form a complete word. A heavy sliding door sound came from the end of the corridor. The low rumble of the incinerator starting up penetrated the walls, as if an iron beast were swallowing underground. Han Yu couldn't lie still anymore. He bit his tongue, blood flowing out instantly, the root of his tongue going numb. Faking unconsciousness, waiting for rescue, praying for a procedural error, these thoughts were crushed into fragments by the sound of the incinerator. He would become the next streak. Hey, A19 rising. Someone laughed in the speaker. He understands. Asian male, late adult response. Interesting. Get lost. Han Yu suppressed this curse between his teeth, his gaze sweeping across his wrists, the bed frame, the cart, the observation window, and the ceiling camera. He needed tools, access control, clothes, and exit. Every time he thought of a word, it felt like a nail was hammered into the back of his head. Just as he stared at a loose screw by the side of the bed, a few thin lines of gold floated into his field of vision. The lines extended from the gap in the screw to the stress point of the bed frame, then slid from the inside of the wrist ring under his skin, climbing along the arm nerves all the way to his chest. Cold, rigid small characters popped up beside the marking lines. Pseudo-V residue. Neural turbulence, rejecting sentry energy spectrum, low power suppression. Neural suppression ring. Shell fatigue, lock teeth offset 0.7 mm. Han Yu closed his eyes, then opened them again. The golden lines were still there. Fine, whatever. His voice was as hoarse as sandpaper. It doesn't matter if I go a little crazier. He used his shackled fingers to reach for the screw, bit by bit. He was half an inch short. He pulled again, the wrist ring digging into his flesh, and an electric current stung him like a warning. He stopped, his breathing ragged, his gaze falling to the edge of the bedsheet. There were blood clots under the bedsheet, already hardened. Han Yu used his fingertips to hook the fibers beside the blood clot and pulled slowly. The bedsheet was pulled into wrinkles, and the screw followed, rolling gently for half a turn. Still a little short, he used his ankle to bump the bed frame. Clang. The footsteps outside paused. Han Yu immediately lay back, closed his eyes, and deliberately let out 2 weak gasps from his throat. The shadow behind the observation window approached, stopped for a few seconds, and then walked away. He opened his eyes again, his eyes bloodshot. The second bump was lighter, and the screw rolled beneath his fingertips. Han Yu clamped onto it, the analytical vision glowing in his vision, and he aligned the screw head with the gap in the wrist ring. But he couldn't pry it open with just the screw. He stared at the sentry energy spectrum, prompt, and tried to press his attention into his wrist bones. The heat source that had been suppressed deep within his body was like a dormant furnace core, and he dragged it up bit by bit. The blood vessels under his skin grew hot. His wrist bones went numb first, then swelled with heat. The electric current exploded again. Han Yu almost bit his tongue off. His shoulders tensed until he trembled, the screw wedged into the offset of the lock teeth, and the heat from his wrist bones surged upward violently. Click. A very light sound. The neural suppression ring on his right hand popped open a crack. Han Yu didn't sit up immediately. He waited for 2 seconds, and after confirming the speaker didn't react, he pulled his wrist out of the ring. His skin was scraped, and blood trickled down from the base of his palm. The gold line swept over the left hand shackle and the ankle restraints, marking 2 weak points. 30 seconds later, he rolled off the hospital bed, his knees slamming into the floor tiles, nearly vomiting a second time. The sound of a card swipe came from outside the door. Han Yu grabbed the sedative syringe from the cart and pressed his back against the door. A young female researcher entered, a pair of light-colored eyes behind her goggles. She looked down at her tablet, muttering, A19, body temperature rising, suppression current abnormal, may need replacement. The door closed behind her. The needle pressed against the back of her hand. The female researcher froze, and the tablet dropped to the floor with a clatter. Don't scream. Han Yu's English carried the taste of blood, but his hand was steady. If this goes in, you'll be asleep before I am. Please, please don't hurt me. Her throat tightened, and tears quickly blurred the edges of her goggles. I'm just a recorder, I didn't touch your dosage, I'm not responsible for disposal. Access card. I don't have high-level clearance, I can only open the observation room and B corridor. ID badge. She tremblingly took off the white ID badge from her chest, her hand shrinking back halfway, as if afraid the needle would prick her. Han Yu pressed the syringe down by a millimeter. Hurry. Okay. The white ID badge fell into Han Yu's hand. He glanced at the name, having no interest in remembering it. There was a camera in the corridor outside, 2 security guards in the left corridor, and an incinerator on the right. The analytical vision sliced the camera blind spots into several short, safe paths. The female researcher saw his gaze shift outside the door, her voice trembling even more. You can't escape, the Compound V laboratory has 3 layers of isolation. The pseudo-V in your body will reject, they will track your heart rate, and you will die in the corridor. Han Yu picked up the tablet from the floor. On the screen was his basic information. Name field, blank, ID, A19. Status. Compound V failed batch, observation value pending. He shoved the tablet into the waste bin nearby and took 2 sedative syringes, a roll of bandages, and a pair of small surgical scissors from the cart. Swipe the door. The female researcher pressed against the wall and swiped open the observation room side door. Han Yu pushed her in, closed the door behind him, and jammed the outer door handle with the surgical scissors. She lunged at the glass, her palms turning white as she slapped against it. Please, they'll think I helped you escape. I'll be fired, or sent to. Han Yu paused for half a beat. He looked at her, then at the exposed flesh on his own wrist, his voice very low. I just want to live right now, too. The corridor warning lights hadn't turned red yet. Han Yu bent down and rushed into the first blind spot, his white hospital pants stained with blood, his bare feet stepping across the cold floor. The conversation of the security guards on the left drifted from around the corner. Another one burned in B corridor. That's how the adult batches are. The boss wants data, the underlings want speed, the unlucky ones all end up in the furnace. Han Yu pressed against the wall and swiped the ID badge on the maintenance door. Beep. Red light. Insufficient clearance. He cursed and looked up at the ventilation duct. The analytical vision immediately crawled onto the metal grill, marking 4 screws and an aging crack. He pried in with the surgical scissors, and as the first screw fell, the female researcher at the end of the corridor finally smashed the alarm button. The alarm exploded, red light swept across the walls, and the security guard's footsteps accelerated violently. B corridor. A19 is escaping. Han Yu twisted off the last screw and grabbed the edge of the ventilation duct with both hands. The heat in his wrist bones surged up again, swelling his muscles. He forced his body inside, and just as his ankles left the ground, a stun gun bolt nailed into the wall, blue arcs of electricity crackling wildly. Stop. Han Yu turned back and gave the middle finger to the security guard holding the gun. You first. He crawled into the ventilation duct, his knees and elbows aching as they hit the sheet metal. Behind him, people were moving ladders, shouting to seal B corridor, and reporting, Compound V failed batch escaped. Han Yu crawled along the analytical vision, turned right, lowered his body, and slid down from a loose maintenance panel. Bang! He fell into the logistics trash room, his shoulder knocking over a barrel of discarded hazmat suits. The fire door outside was open a crack, and cold air poured in, carrying the smell of street food fumes and post-rain asphalt. Han Yu grabbed a gray cleaning jacket and threw it on, pulling the brim of his cap low, stumbling into the back door loading area. The sound of traffic in the distance surged like a tide. He leaned against the wall, blood dripping from his wrist into his cuff. The TV in the convenience store on the street was playing the news. On screen, a VOD International PR spokesperson stood before the camera, their expression of grief flawless. The scrolling subtitles below made Han Yu's eyes ache. The 7-member A train was involved in an accident during a high-speed operation, resulting in the tragic death of civilian Robin. The host's voice followed. VOD stated that A train was executing an urgent pursuit mission at the time. The accident was purely an unavoidable tragedy, and the company will provide support to the family. Han Yu stopped outside the convenience store glass, his fingertips pressing against his still bleeding wrist. The TV screen cut to A train's promotional photo. He was wearing a blue tactical suit, smiling brightly. The third monitor wall in VOD's underground security room went black. The supervisor slammed his coffee cup onto the desk, brown liquid splashing into the keyboard gaps. The technician scrambled to unplug the cables, only to end up turning the backup feed for Channel B into static. Don't report A19's escape to me again. The supervisor roared, straining his voice. Write it up as a minor Compound V malfunction, and have the Compound V project team handle the recovery themselves. Do you understand? Handle it themselves. Someone in the corner pressed down on their headset. Should we sync this with the 7 tower? Sync my ass. The supervisor turned his head, his face ashen. Do you want Homelander to come down here and ask us why a failed experiment escaped right from under his feet? No one answered. The only sounds left in the security room were the clicking of a jammed printer and the rigid shadows cast by the red alarm lights sweeping across faces. On the screen, Han Yu appeared for the last time in the rear loading area, draped in a gray cleaning jacket, blood staining the left cuff, his hat brim pulled down to his nose bridge. The supervisor stared for 2 seconds, then picked up the internal communicator. Where is A train? 10 seconds later, A train's voice came through the speaker, with the sound of women laughing and music in the background. Buddy, I'm off today. The supervisor tossed the photo to the assistant beside him. Send it to him. File transfer complete popped up in the bottom right corner of the screen. There was a moment of silence on A-Train's end. Huh, he laughed. You want me to catch this? Looks like some Asian kid who just crawled out of a dumpster. The supervisor suppressed his anger. A-19. An escaped experimental subject from the Compound V project, possibly carrying unstable abilities. Compound V. A-Train smacked his lips. Those expendables with unstable effects. Fine, give me the location. Stay out of the news. I just finished being on the news. This sentence made the security room even quieter. The PR headlines regarding the Robin incident were still scrolling on the news channel upstairs. The supervisor's temple twitched, and his voice dropped, which is exactly why you should clean this up. A-Train, don't go smashing into another civilian. A zipper sound came through the speaker, and A-Train sneered. Relax, the failed experiment won't get far. At the subway station entrance, Han Yu stood in front of an automatic ticket machine, his fingertips hovering over the screen, unable to press it for a long time. He had no bank card, no cash, and even his phone had been confiscated in the laboratory. The gray cleaning jacket clung to his skin, cold, smelling of a mixture of disinfectant, plastic bags, and blood. Under the cuffs, the welts left by the neural inhibitor ring were still oozing blood. Someone behind him urged, "Hey, buddy, are you buying or not?" Han Yu stepped aside. His fingers were still trembling. He shoved his hand into his pocket, digging his nails into his palm. The pain surged, clearing his head a little. The camera above the ticket booth rotated, its black mirror sweeping across the crowd. Analytical vision lines lit up one by one in his field of view. Camera angles, blind spots, security guards' lines of sight, gate intervals, all were broken down into fine lines. Maintenance door on the left. The latch was worn. The door frame screws were loose. Han Yu kept his head down, squeezing forward with a crowd of passengers who had just come down the escalator. During the 2 seconds a backpack blocked the camera, he pressed his shoulder against the maintenance door, sliding his white ID badge out of his sleeve and wedging it into the door gap to hold the worn latch. Click. The door gap opened half a finger's width. He pushed the door open, slipped inside, and pulled it shut behind him. The passageway was damp, with old water stains on the walls, and the vibration of an arriving train in the distance crawled up from the soles of his feet. He leaned against the wall, his chest heaving, his stomach churning again. Don't throw up. He gritted his teeth, suppressing the acidity in his throat. Analytical vision lines extended along the passageway, passing through pipes and marking 4 surveillance blind spots above the platform. A steel cable hung beside the maintenance cabinet, as thick as 2 fingers pressed together, with the other end coiled on a reel, beside a yellow sign that read, "For advertising screen bracket maintenance only." Han Yu reached out to pull it. The first tug didn't move it. His shoulder slammed into the cabinet door, the wound tearing open against the fabric, and blood trickled down his wrist bone. On the second tug, the reel emitted a harsh creaking sound, and the steel cable slid half a meter out of the wheel groove. He caught his breath and dragged the steel cable toward the maintenance hatch. The platform announcement blared, the female voice steady to the point of distortion. "The train to Manhattan is arriving soon. Please step behind the yellow safety line." The crowd surged forward. Han Yu peered out through the crack in the maintenance door. The advertising screen hung beside a platform pillar, playing a VOT public service announcement. A-Train was wearing his blue suit, giving a thumbs up to the camera, with the caption, "Speed protects every day." How ironic. A string of red values suddenly jumped out at the edge of his vision. Target. A-Train. Speed trajectory. Outside east entrance right pointing arrow turnstile area right pointing arrow platform. Heart rate. Abnormally high frequency. Compound versus contamination level, skyrocketing. Needle mark on inner right arm, fresh. Han Yu did not rush out. He wrapped the end of the steel cable around the crossbeam inside the maintenance door, fed it out from under the door gap, and jammed it into the metal slot behind the advertising screen bracket. His fingertips trembled, and he nearly slipped while tying the knot. He paused, bit down on the steel cable's casing with his teeth, and tightened the last loop. The train's wind pressure flooded the platform. The moment the blue blur slammed into the crowd's line of sight, the screams hadn't even had time to rise. A-Train streaked along the edge of the platform, his speed so fast that the advertising screen's image was torn into patterns by the airflow. His gaze swept over the maintenance door, that slight, flippant smile still hanging on his face. Found you, little lab rat. Han Yu kicked the maintenance door open. The steel cable snapped taut. A-Train's pupils constricted. He tried to turn, his shoe soles scraping two black marks onto the floor tiles, but the inertia from his high speed flung his entire body violently toward the advertising screen bracket. Boom! The advertising screen exploded. Glass shards and plastic casing sprayed everywhere. The blue hero's face from the public service announcement was torn into pieces, and electric sparks crackled wildly. A-Train, like a ball hit by a baseball bat, rolled 7 or 8 meters across the ground, knocking over a row of trash cans, and slammed his shoulder into a pillar. The platform went into an uproar. Oh my god, it's A-Train. Film it fast. Phones were raised one after another, lenses chasing the blue figure crawling up in embarrassment amidst the glass covering the floor. Some people retreated, while others couldn't bear to leave at all, the screens lighting up in a dense crowd. Han Yu rushed out from behind the maintenance door, his knees still weak, but his speed didn't falter. He stepped over the broken glass, knelt halfway down, and pinned A-Train's right wrist with his foot. A-Train's face was pressed against the ground, nosebleed smearing onto the white tiles, his curses stuck in his throat. You mother F. Han Yu pressed his knee down. Click. A-Train's wrist was pinned flat against the ground, exposing the needle mark on the inside of his right arm to the phone lights. Han Yu tore a VOT pursuit communicator from his waist and flipped over the abnormal heart rate monitor on A-Train's wrist, aiming the screen at the nearby phones. The numbers jumped alarmingly. Get a clear shot, Han Yu said, his voice hoarse but steady. Needle mark on the right arm, heart rate monitor, VOT internal pursuit communicator. A-Train struggled, but couldn't break free. He could still run, but he was surrounded by lenses. The heat from just having killed Robin hadn't died down yet. If he ran over the crowd in the subway station again, even VOT's PR would have to lose their heads trying to fix it. Han Yu leaned down, only A-Train could hear the second half of his sentence. The Robin incident, you wrote it off as an accident. A-Train's lips moved. I was on a mission, I didn't. Save your energy. Han Yu pressed the communicator to his ear, where the security supervisor's urgent calls were still coming through. A-19 location confirmed. A-Train, respond. Do not trigger a public incident. Han Yu pressed the record button. A-Train's expression changed. He looked up at Han Yu, and for the first time, he didn't find the excitement of a fan seeing the Seven, nor the panic of an ordinary person seeing a superhuman. Those eyes were very black and red with pain, but they were staring at the needle mark, the communicator, and the position of the surrounding lenses, as if he were sentencing him. Brother, A-Train lowered his voice, his Adam's apple bobbing, you don't understand this. VOT will deal with you, and they will deal with all of us. Give the stuff to me, and I can pretend I never saw you. You already saw me. I can speak for you. You don't even dare to mention Robin. A-Train looked like his neck was being throttled, his shoulders tensing up. He wanted to say something threatening, but his mouth opened and he changed his mind. I just ran too fast. Then listen slower. Han Yu released his foot and tucked the communicator into his inner jacket pocket. He swayed as he stood up, his left hand bracing against the wreckage of the advertising screen, his palm cut open by glass. A thin golden light flashed at the edge of the wound, quickly burrowing back under the skin. Someone nearby shouted, Sentinel. Is he that Sentinel? The subway hero. He was glowing just now, did you guys catch that? A-Train had also seen that golden light. His pupils constricted, and he froze amidst the broken glass. A compound V failed experiment wouldn't have this kind of energy signature, at least not the lunatics he had seen. Han Yu retreated toward the maintenance door, the shadow of his hat brim covering half his face. Go back and tell VOT. A-Train clutched his wrist, his breathing as ragged as a broken bellows. Han Yu looked at him, emphasizing every word. Next time, don't send a junkie to catch a sentinel. The sound of the arriving train drowned out the crowd's exclamations. Han Yu turned and slipped back into the maintenance passageway, his gray jacket flashing through the door gap before disappearing behind the dim maintenance lights. 3 minutes later, VOT's underground security room received the video feed from the subway station. The supervisor stared at the slow-motion footage. This time, he didn't throw his coffee cup. In the footage, Han Yu kicked the door, the steel cable snapped taut, and A-Train smashed into the advertising screen. At the exact frame where his palm braced against the wreckage, the surveillance captured a brief flash of golden light crawling along his wrist bone, which didn't match the blue contamination reaction in the Compound V database at all. The technician swallowed hard. Supervisor, the source of this energy signature. The supervisor raised his hand and paused the footage. The screen froze on the side profile of Han Yu looking back. He gripped the communicator, making it click, and squeezed the words out through his teeth. Seal this footage. Don't let the 7 Tower know yet. A-Train locked the equipment room door from the inside, slid down against the metal cabinet, his wrists trembling violently. A large tear ripped through the cuff of his uniform, and blood mixed with fragments from the advertising screen clung to his forearm. He turned the faucet to the maximum, rusty water rushing over the white porcelain sink, leaving a circle of red. He leaned his face in, scrubbed it haphazardly, tiny shards of glass still wedged under his fingernails. His phone chimed. A-Train gritted his teeth, dialed the VOD internal hotline, and tapped open the new message with his other hand. In the video, he rushed out from the end of the subway platform, smashed through the advertising screen, and crashed into a pile of glass. In the slow-motion frame where he raised his hand, the needle mark was clearly visible, and below the cuff, the blue light of a VOD pursuit tracker was blinking. The second clip was even more ruthless. Han Yu's voice was very low. Don't send a junkie to catch a sentinel next time. A-Train's breath hitched. The hotline connected, and the urgent voice of the security department attendant came through. A-Train. Where are you? The supervisor wants you to report your location immediately. The Compound Versus project team has already. Shut up. A-Train held the phone to his ear, his eyes fixed on the last second of the selfie video. The screen went black, then another line of text popped up. 1 Compound Versus. A temporary warehouse coordinate. Go to Huey's door and apologize. Below that was another sentence. 10 minutes later, the video will be sent to all street reporters. A-Train raised his hand and slammed it against the metal cabinet, denting it. He wanted to call back and curse, his thumb hovering over the screen, but he couldn't bring himself to press it. There were footsteps outside the door. He turned off the faucet, pulled down an old towel from the wall to wipe his hands, and squeezed the words out from his throat. Tell the supervisor not to look for me yet. Are you crazy? Vought. I said don't look for me yet. He hung up, rummaged behind the cleaning rack, and pulled out a gray first aid kit. At the bottom of the box was a blue syringe with a cold chain label, taken from a batch of Compound V samples that had been temporarily relocated. A-Train stared at the syringe, his jaw tight. No matter how fast he ran, he couldn't shake off that slow-motion clip on his phone. At Huey's door, the VOT PR representative was already sitting in the living room. She was wearing a light gray suit, a thick stack of agreements on her lap, her tone so soft it was impossible to find fault with. Mr. Campbell, VOT is willing to cover all of Ms. Robbins' subsequent medical expenses, psychological rehabilitation costs, and an additional consolation payment. The amount is here, you can take a look. Huey's father wore reading glasses, his fingers pausing several times on the edge of the pages. He saw the number and swallowed hard. The living room was crowded. An old sofa, a TV cabinet, and the paper bag Robin had brought last night were still by the door, half a pack of cookies peeking out from inside. Huey stood by the window, clutching a black pen, his knuckles white. The PR representative turned to the last few pages of the agreement, her smile unchanged. These are just standard clauses. Discussions regarding the accident need to have a unified narrative from both sides to avoid causing secondary trauma to the family. We will arrange for someone to take care of you, and we will also help block the media. Unified narrative. Huey stared at the line of text, his throat dry. It says here, no public discussion of accident details. Legal texts are a bit more rigorous. Rigorous enough to make me shut up. The PR representative capped the pen and leaned forward. Huey, I understand you're having a hard time right now. But you have to consider your father. He's old, and Ms. Robin needs quiet to recover. You can't fight the internet, and you can't fight those poorly edited street videos. Huey's father looked up, his lips moving. Huey, maybe we should just. The doorbell rang. Ding dong. The PR representative frowned, and the two security guards behind her looked at the door simultaneously. Before the host could open the door, the latch clicked open on its own. Han Yu stood outside, his hat brim pulled low, a temporary bandage wrapped around his left hand, the edges still stained with red. Huey froze. You. Did you sign it yet? Han Yu walked into the living room, his gaze sweeping over the agreement on the table and falling onto the VOD ID badge on the PR representative's chest. The PR representative stood up. This is a private family meeting, you have no right to enter. I have a video. As these 4 words fell, the air in the living room seemed to tighten. Han Yu plugged a small screencaster into the TV port and tapped his phone twice. The TV screen lit up, and the footage of subway platform number 2 filled the entire wall. The sound of a train smashing through the advertising screen exploded from the TV speakers. The reading glasses in Huey's father's hand fell onto his knees. Huey stared at the screen, his shoulders trembling, the tip of his pen piercing the agreement paper. The footage switched to slow motion. A-train's arm raised, the needle mark, bloodstains, and the blinking light of the pursuit tracker frozen frame by frame. Then came the static of internal VOT communications. Minor compound V runaway accident, self-recovery. The smile on the PR representative's face couldn't hold. She reached out to press her earpiece. At the door, come in, take this person. Click. Han Yu pinched the voice recorder in her pocket with 2 fingers, the plastic shell shattering into pieces between his fingers, tiny parts clattering onto the coffee table. He looked at her. Still recording. I can add a line about hush money to make it easier for you to report back. The security guard took a step forward. Han Yu didn't turn his head, his fingertips flashing with analytical vision, and the metal ashtray on the coffee table sprang up, smashing into the wall right by the first security guard's ear. The plaster cracked, and white dust fell onto the man's shoulder. It stopped. The second security guard's hand reached for his waist, then slowly let go. Han Yu picked up the settlement agreement, turned to the confidentiality clause page, and held it out to Huey. Look closely. The thing they are buying is your mouth. The PR representative's face turned pale. This is illegal trespassing, threatening VOT staff, and spreading unverified videos. You will be sued into bankruptcy. Fine then. Han Yu tapped his phone. The screen displayed over 30 scheduled sending windows, the recipients including local TV stations, street livestream accounts, subway accident witness groups, and a few small media outlets that specialized in superhero scandals. He turned the phone toward her. You have 2 minutes. The PR representative's outstretched hand froze in midair. Sharp screeching of brakes came from outside. Someone downstairs cursed, and footsteps came up the stairs, each step making the staircase tremble. A-train appeared at the door, his sunglasses hanging low on his nose, blood still uncleaned on his face. He clutched a cold chain box in one hand and held a sticky note with coordinates in the other. He saw himself on the TV, his face twitching. You actually dared to come. Han Yu put his phone away. A-train threw the cold chain box onto the table, his voice hoarse. Here's your stuff. Here are the coordinates too. Delete the video. Han Yu didn't touch the box. You're missing one thing. A-train's gaze shifted from his face to Huey. Huey stood by the sofa, his whole body taut like a thread about to snap, his eyes red, the pen in his hand snapped in half, black ink staining his fingertips. The PR representative whispered, A-train, this isn't the place. Shut up. A-train finished yelling, then hitched. He looked at Huey, his lips parting several times, and squeezed out a sentence. I was running too fast that day, I didn't see her. Huey's breathing grew heavier and heavier. Apologize. Han Yu spoke from the side. The veins on A-train's neck throbbed. I said I didn't see her. Apologize. The slow motion footage was still paused on the TV. The needle mark was magnified to an eye-stinging degree, and the VOT communication static hissed in the living room. A-train took off his sunglasses, his fingers brushing over the bridge of his nose, as if trying to strike his usual pose for the cameras, but only embarrassment remained. He lowered his head, his voice muffled and low, I'm sorry. Huey rushed forward. A fist smashed into A-train's face, the sound not loud, but it silenced the entire living room. Huey staggered back first, his wrist bending in pain, his teeth grinding together with a creaking sound. A-train didn't fight back, the corner of his mouth slightly cut. He looked up at Han Yu, his eyes filled with both fire and fear. Han Yu reached out and steadied Huey's shoulder, keeping him from falling onto the coffee table. Enough. Huey's father spoke in a trembling voice, his hand pressed against his chest. Huey, stop hitting him. Huey kept his head down, his shoulders heaving. He didn't cry out, only clenched and unclenched his hand, which was red and throbbing with pain. Han Yu picked up the stack of agreements and tore them in half. The sound of the paper tearing was crisp. The PR representative took a step forward, and Hanyu tossed the two halves of the agreement into her arms. Go back and write your report. Hanyu pointed to the TV. The gag order failed, evidence was preserved on site, and a member of the seven apologized in person. I've already thought of the wording for you. The PR representative held the torn paper, the grayness on her face unable to be covered even by foundation. She retreated to the door with the security guards, not even leaving a threat behind. A-Train pressed the sticky note onto the cold chain box, lowering his voice. The video. Hanyu picked up the cold chain box, his analytical vision sweeping along the seams of the box. The blue syringe was intact, and the cold chain indicator was still lit. The coordinates on the sticky note pointed to a temporary VOT warehouse, the serial number half crossed out, leaving only a backdoor access code. I'll keep a copy. Hanyu looked up. You know better than I do how much a VOT promise is worth. A-Train's face darkened, and he turned and left. After the door closed, only the humming of the TV cooling down remained in the living room. Huey's father sat back on the sofa, looking as if he had aged several years in an instant. He wanted to say something, rubbed his hands on his knees twice, but didn't speak. Huey rummaged through the paper bag by the door and pulled out a small keychain. A plastic bear, its edges worn white, with the colorful thread Robin used still wrapped around the ring. He handed it to Hanyu. She said yesterday she wanted to get me a new one. She told me not to throw this old one away. Hanyu looked at the keychain, paused for a beat, then took it and clipped it onto the zipper of the cold chain box. Huey looked up, his eyes extremely red. If you're really going to investigate VOT, I want to know the truth. Robin almost, and they still wanted me to sign that thing. If you want in, don't expect to return to a normal life. Huey's lips pressed into a thin line. He looked at his father, then at the torn fragments of the agreement. I know, you only know pain right now. Hanyu stuffed his phone back into his jacket. When you know fear, come find me again. Huey didn't back down. He threw the broken pen into the trash can, his voice very soft. Then I'll start with fear. Hanyu glanced at him, didn't respond, picked up the cold chain box, and walked out. The security camera at the end of the hallway turned half a notch, and a red dot lit up. In the monitoring room of the temporary VOT warehouse, the screen switched to the hallway footage. Hanyu's profile lingered in the static for a second, the shadow of his hat brim obscuring his eyes, the cold chain box in his hand reflecting a cold, white light. Ashley stood by the console, the tablet in her hand still open to the Public Relations Department's accident handling procedure. She was just about to speak when someone pushed the door open behind her. A red cape swept across the door frame. Homelander stared at the profile on the screen, the smile on his face fading away bit by bit. Who is he? The fluorescent light in Huey's kitchen had a loose connection, flickering on and off. 10 minutes ago, Hanyu had already picked up the cold chain box and left, but just as the surveillance camera at the end of the hallway turned toward him, a snippet of a call popped up on the VOT tracker in his pocket. He didn't go downstairs. Instead, he skirted around the camera, doubled back to the kitchen, locked the door, and sat at the dining table, rolling his sleeves up to his elbows, his fingertips pressing down on the tracker. The plastic casing was pried open with a small pair of surgical scissors. A chip the size of a fingernail inside was still intermittently heating up, and the earpiece occasionally emitted bits of static. A19. Hallway surveillance lost. Calling. He used the tip of the scissors to snip a copper wire, and the static immediately died. Huey stood by the refrigerator, clutching a glass of water, the surface of which was shaking violently. Huey's father sat on that old chair by the kitchen door, a blanket over his knees, his eyes fixed on the cold chain box. The little plastic bear hung from the box's zipper. No one spoke. Knock, knock, knock. The knocking was polite, 3 times, then silence. Huey flinched as if pricked by a needle, the rim of the glass clinking against his teeth with a crisp sound. I'll go. He set the glass down and walked to the entryway. Just as his hand touched the latch, the person outside spoke. Huey Campbell. The voice was low and hoarse, carrying the rough, booze-soaked amusement of a dive bar. Huey opened the door halfway. A man in a black trench coat stood outside, his beard messily trimmed, but his eyes were sharp. He carried a paper bag, looking like a neighbor coming for a visit, but his foot was already wedged into the door gap. Billy Butcher. The man shoved the paper bag into Huey's arms. Heard your place has been lively today. Those Vought sons of fools been here. Huey held the bag, unable to respond. Butcher's gaze passed over his shoulder and landed in the kitchen. Han Yu didn't look up. The last micro screw on the back of the tracker was unscrewed. He placed the chip on a napkin, next to the sticky note A-Train had given him, the backdoor access code, and a broken pen. Butcher smiled. That smile plastered on his face was as cold as the back of a knife. Well, he walked in, his boot soles crushing the shredded agreement on the living room carpet. A little monster leaked by Vought, already sitting in someone else's kitchen holding a meeting. Huey's expression changed. He saved Robin. I didn't say he didn't save anyone. Butcher closed the door, pulled a pack of cigarettes from his trench coat pocket, then put it back. Monsters sometimes take kittens down from trees, only to turn around and tear the whole street apart. Superhumans, they're all the same. Huey's father gripped the armrest of his chair, his lips moving. Sir, we've already. Old man, don't be nervous. Butcher didn't even look at him, his gaze glued to Han Yu's hands. I've come to help you get justice. Han Yu flipped the tracker over, and the analytical vision spread out in his field of view. Butcher tightened the grip on his right hand. The fabric inside his trench coat was pushed out by the corner of a gun handle. His shoulders didn't move, but his wrist bone shifted by 3 degrees. Han Yu held the chipped solder joint with the tip of the scissors, his voice flat. Before you go seeking justice, put the safety back on. The kitchen went quiet for a beat. Huey was stunned. What safety? Bang! The gunshot shattered the magnet on the refrigerator door. A round magnet that said, Family Pizza Night, flew off, hit the wall, and cracked in 2. Huey's father leaned back, the chair legs scraping across the floor, and he fell to the ground with a thud. He clutched the blanket, a short cry squeezing out of his throat. Huey lunged to help him up. Dad. Han Yu remained in his seat. His chair had only shifted half an inch to the left, his shoulder brushing past the bullet's trajectory, the fabric of his jacket singed by the hot air. The bullet embedded itself in the wall, and gypsum dust fell onto the dining table, covering half the sticky note. Butcher held the gun, the muzzle less than 3 meters from the center of Han Yu's forehead. Fast reflexes. He grinned. How much compound V did Vought pump into you? 1 vial, 2, or did they pour the whole bucket down your throat? Han Yu put down the scissors and stood up, walking to the wall. Huey shouted, Han Yu, don't. Han Yu hooked his fingers into the edge of the bullet hole, his knuckles clicking. He pried the deformed bullet head out of the wall, his fingers covered in gypsum dust. Clatter. The bullet head was thrown back onto the dining table, rolling in front of Butcher and coming to a stop next to the disassembled chip. Becca. The smile on Butcher's face vanished completely. The muzzle didn't lower. The faulty fluorescent light in the kitchen flickered again, casting his eye sockets into deeper shadow. The face that had been mocking a second ago looked locked from within, leaving only hard flesh and suppressed fire. Huey helped his father stand, his hand frozen in midair. Who is Becca? His voice was dry. Butcher didn't answer. He stared at Han Yu, his finger against the trigger, the pad of his finger pressed white. Where did you hear that? Han Yu wiped the gypsum dust from his fingertips with a tissue. Halfway through, the tissue tore. He glanced at the tear and tossed the paper ball into the trash can. Vought has a terrible habit of hiding things. Names, compensation codes, internal incident levels, they like to keep them all in the same encrypted index. You've been looking for Homelander for a long time. Butcher stepped forward, the muzzle pressing closer. Kid, try saying her name again. Becca. Han Yu looked up. Your wife. Huey looked sharply at Butcher. Butcher's Adam's apple bobbed, the gun steadied, but the veins on the back of his hand stood out. That killing intent fell onto the tabletop. Even Huey's father clamped his mouth shut, the blanket sliding from his knees to the floor. Han Yu didn't back down. The analytical vision pulsed, tracing Butcher's forearm, trigger, muzzle, and center of gravity at his knees. If a second shot were fired, he was confident he could dodge the vitals, but Huey's father was sitting too close, and the ricochet path would be messy. He kicked the cold chain box an inch toward the inside of the table leg. The little bear keychain hit the box buckle with a faint sound. You hate Homelander, Han Yu said. You also hate everything that wears a cape, shoots commercials, and smiles while accepting awards after running over regular people. You want to drag Huey into this, to use Robin's pain to tie a rope around him. Huey pressed his lips together. Butcher sneered. You feel sorry for him. Something like you can feel sorry. I can settle accounts. Han Yu retrieved the sticky note from the table and tucked it into his inner jacket pocket. What VOT owes me, what the Compound V project owes me, what A-Train owes Robin, what Homelander owes you. We can settle the accounts together, but don't point your gun around aimlessly. Ha! Butcher's laugh squeezed out from between his teeth. Listen to that, quite the talker. You lab rats learn to speak human pretty fast. Huey finally couldn't take it anymore. Enough. If he really wanted to hurt us, he could have left when VOT's people were here earlier. Why leave evidence? You started shooting the moment you walked in. How are you any different from those VOT people? Butcher tilted his head to look at him. There's a big difference, kid. I looked you in the eye before I fired. Bullshit. Huey's hand was still supporting his father, his voice shaking, but he didn't let go. You didn't even look at my dad before you fired. Butcher's expression faltered. Han Yu glanced at Huey. That look made Huey swallow the rest of his sentence. His chest heaved rapidly, his grip on his father's arm tightening. Butcher moved the muzzle from Han Yu's forehead to his chest, then back to his forehead, as if choosing a spot that would make him feel more comfortable. You know too much, he said in a low voice. You know too little, Han Yu retorted quickly. VOT's temporary warehouses, the Compound V project group, neural inhibitors, the supply cut of sedatives. You're only focused on Homelander right now, which gives them the perfect time to burn the experimental lists clean. Butcher's eyelids narrowed. You have the list. Almost. Coordinates. Han Yu didn't answer. Butcher understood and licked his molars. You're planning to go alone. I don't know your team, and I have no interest in being a disposable bullet for Butcher's squad. Han Yu picked up the disassembled tracker chip and placed it on a coaster. If you want to cooperate, bring chips to the table. If you want to recruit, learn not to shoot at kitchens first. Huey's father shakily picked up the blanket from the floor, his voice very soft. My refrigerator. No one responded to that. Butcher suddenly holstered his gun, his movement so crisp it was as if that shot had just been a greeting. He crossed the table and leaned in close to Han Yu, his trench coat smelling of tobacco and cold iron. The distance between them was only half a step. Listen, A-19, don't touch my wounds. Butcher lowered his voice. I'm saving them for Homelander. Whoever reaches for them, I'll chop their hands off. Han Yu pushed the chip into the metal casing and clicked it shut. Then don't use other people's wounds as a rope. Huey's gaze lingered on Han Yu's face, then shifted to Butcher's holster. He looked as if he were seeing the two men standing in his house for the first time. His throat moved a few times, and finally, he squeezed out, I want to investigate VOT, but I don't want my dad to have a gun pointed at him again. Butcher looked at him for 2 seconds and snorted. Fine, the kid isn't completely stupid. He fished a crumpled business card from his pocket and tossed it onto the dining table. There was no company name on the card, only a string of numbers and a handwritten, B. When you really know what fear is, call this. Butcher turned to walk to the door, but stopped when his hand touched the doorknob. Han Yu. This was the first time he had said his name. Han Yu looked up. Butcher didn't look back. You'd better actually be able to get that list. If you use it to bargain with VOT, I'll come back and tear you and this table apart. Remember to pay for the refrigerator magnet. Han Yu said. Butcher cursed with a filthy British expletive and pulled the door open to leave. After the door closed, only the buzzing of the fluorescent light remained in the kitchen. Huey's father bent down to pick up the broken magnet pieces, his hands shaking too much to piece together the half-pizza pattern. Huey crouched down to help him pick them up. Halfway through, he looked up at Han Yu. You mentioned a temporary warehouse earlier. Han Yu reassembled the VOT tracker and stuffed it into his jacket. He picked up the cold chain box, and the little bear keychain swung twice on the zipper. You stay home. I can. Your dad just got scared by a gun. Han Yu interrupted him. Fix the refrigerator door first, then learn how to be afraid. Huey gritted his teeth and didn't follow. Han Yu walked to the entryway, paused, picked up Butcher's business card, and turned it face down on the TV cabinet. The surveillance camera at the end of the hallway outside was already dark. He adjusted the brim of his hat and went downstairs carrying the cold chain box. The sticky note in his pocket was pressed against his palm, the back door access code softened by sweat. In the stairwell, the VOT tracker suddenly lit up with half a bar of red, and a fragmented female voice spilled out through the static. Temporary warehouse. North side door. All security, switch to thermal patrol. Han Yu stuffed the cold chain box into the fireproof cabinet behind the dumpster at the end of the alley, reversed his jacket, pulled his cap brim low, and walked along the freight road for 6 minutes. At the end of the coordinates on the sticky note, there was a low warehouse with a sign hanging on it that read, Medical Aid Cooperation Transit Point. 2 security guards stood at the entrance, stun guns on their waists, with VOD outsourced security badges pinned to their shoulders. A refrigerated truck was parked nearby, the cargo hold refrigerator humming, and a circle of untorn drug transport seals clung to the tailgate. It looked too clean. Han Yu crouched behind the discarded tires of the repair shop across the street, pressing his fingertips below his left eye. Analytical vision spread from the edges of his vision, crawling inch by inch along the warehouse's outer wall. Camera angles, infrared intersection points, and access control currents were all marked as thin, bright lines. The main entrance had 3-layer verification. The north door had thermal patrol. Above the loading dock was an old ventilation window with half the aluminum frame rusted away, and the infrared coverage stopped 3 feet below the window. Fine, VOD knows how to save money too. He slid a small pair of surgical scissors from his cuff and circled to the other side of the refrigerated truck. The 2 guards were chatting about the 7's latest commercial. One was laughing and imitating A-Train's sprinting posture. Just as he lifted his foot, Han Yu had already stepped onto the wheel, using the momentum to flip onto the roof of the truck. The tip of the scissors pressed against the aluminum window screw with a click. Stop. The guard turned around. Han Yu lay flat on the truck roof, not moving, his breathing suppressed to the bottom of his throat. The refrigerator's vibrations numbed the sheet metal, perfectly masking the second sound of the screw hitting the ground. He gripped the loosened window frame with 2 fingers. Black core patterns emerged from beneath his wrist bone, clinging to the edge without making a single scratching sound. He squeezed inside. The inside of the warehouse was colder than the outside, the smell of disinfectant mixed with the scent of plastic crates, leaving a bitter taste in his nasal cavity. 3 rows of white medicine crates were arranged neatly, each stamped with labels like, Medical Aid, Post-Disaster Neurological Sedation, and, Children's Hospital Donation Channel. Bullshit. Han Yu landed on top of the shelving unit, his knees pressing against the crossbeam as his analytical vision scanned downward. The outer layer of the first row was all real medicine, the second row began to show double bottoms, and beneath the medicine crates in the innermost part of the third row hid a lead-lined compartment. He pried open a crate. The top 2 rows contained painkillers, and when he lifted the partition below, blue labels, a black file folder, and silver-gray metal rings were revealed. The inside of the metal rings had fine electrodes, numbered from CO3 to C12, with a row of small vials of sedatives tucked beside them. Han Yu picked up a neural suppression ring, his fingertips pausing for a beat on the electrodes. That charred smell from the hospital basement welled up again, and the sound of bone spurs scraping against the floor when Carl Pike hit the wall brushed against his eardrums. He put the item back and flipped through the file folder. Compound V project data. Failure list. Stabilization protocol. Sedative dosage ratios. Death remarks. The pages turned quickly until the entry for A19 popped out. A19. Han Yu. Compound V adaptation failed. Abnormal sentry energy spectrum residue. Recovery priority. High. Disposal recommendation. Disassemble sample after sedation. Remark. If escaped for more than 48 hours, eliminate as an external contaminant. He pressed his tongue against his teeth, pinching the corner of the paper until it creased. Behind it were A07, A11, and B02, with strings of red text after their names: heart failure, brainstem damage, skeletal alienation, disposal after failed sedation. There were others. A whole page. Han Yu took a photo of the list, stuck a micro backup device inside the file folder, and his other hand reached for the small server cabinet in the corner of the warehouse. The cabinet door was locked carelessly, as if the person who moved it here temporarily only remembered to lock the door but forgot that this thing was the real treasure. He inserted the data cable. The screen lit up, black background with white text scrolling, as VOD's internal paths unfolded layer by layer. The progress bar had just crawled to 37% when a red intrusion process suddenly appeared on the right side. Signature. Nora Weir. Han Yu's fingertips stopped. A sentence popped up on the screen. Your technique is like opening a safe with an axe. Han Yu stared at the line of text, and 2 seconds later, he tapped on the keyboard, backhanding the connection to lock half of the other party's exit port. You're like stealing lipstick in a burning building. The other side replied quickly. Wow, A19 can type. Did VOD upgrade their training course for failures? If you keep talking nonsense, the other half of your exit port will be gone too. If you dare to lock me, I'll hook the alarm up right under your ass. Han Yu glanced at the progress. The other party was grabbing the financial path. Her movements were precise, bypassing 3 honeypots and even covering up some of his brute force traces while she was at it. This woman had a foul mouth, but steady hands. He changed the failure list download channel to fragmented transmission, and a fine print notification for the hero popularity score panel popped up in the bottom left corner of the screen. Compound V failure list. High value evidence. Current copy completion. 41%. Contested by external intruder. Don't rush me. Han Yu pulled the backup power supply under the server cabinet halfway out, causing the system to misidentify it as a short-term voltage fluctuation. Nora Weir's financial path glitched for a moment, and he took the opportunity to drag the A group and B group lists into his local cache. The other party immediately exploded. You pulled the power. Temporary warehouse, temporary measures. People like you should wash your hands before entering a server room. You should look at who's there before entering a burning building. The cursor on the screen paused for a beat. The financial path was dragged away by the other party, several transfer links flashed red and then disappeared. Han Yu only managed to capture a string of offshore account numbers at the end. Nora Weir didn't try to grab the list again. Instead, she threw a thermal floor plan of the warehouse onto the left side of his screen. North door. Thermal drones. 3 of them. Han Yu looked up. There was a very low humming sound outside the wall, transmitted through the sheet metal like a mosquito flying against his ear bone. Analytical vision immediately pulled out 3 moving heat sources that were sweeping over from above the north door. Tisk. He pulled out the data cable, and the server cabinet emitted a harsh, short beep. Before the alarm could sound, another line popped up on the screen. Run, or are you waiting for me to treat you to coffee? Han Yu stuffed the 6 sedatives into a black bag, his gaze sweeping over a neural suppression ring, but he did not reach for it again. The lock at the end of the shelving unit clicked. Someone in the surveillance room connected the PA system. Personnel inside the warehouse, stop immediately. You have entered a VOT-controlled area. Ashley's voice squeezed out of the speaker, carrying suppressed anger. Han Yu, I know it's you. Put the stuff down, and we can still talk. Han Yu tightened the opening of the black bag and stuffed the file folder into his inner lining. Talk about that compensation agreement nonsense. The broadcast went silent. He raised his hand and pushed a medicine crate off the shelf. The white crate smashed onto the floor, painkillers rolling everywhere, and the guard's footsteps rushed in from outside the door. Don't let him touch the compound project data. Another male voice roared. Seal the north door, seal the loading dock. Han Yu didn't head north. He sprinted up by stepping on the shelving crossbeams. Black core patterns emerged from his palms, clinging to the ceiling conduits. He swung his body and plastered himself above the loading dock. The first drone squeezed in through the gap in the north door, its red light scanning beneath the shelves. Empty. Just as the second one turned, Han Yu dropped from above, jamming the surgical scissors into the rotor guard, and the sound of metal exploded. The drone tilted and crashed into a light tube. The white light in the warehouse flashed twice, and the alarm finally let out a shriek. Like a scream, the guards pushed the door open and rushed in, raising their stun guns. Han Yu grabbed half a strap, swung the black bag to his back, and pushed his low-level biofield to the outside of his left shoulder. 2 electrode needles were fired at him, deflected by the golden membrane, and landed with a crackle in a medicine crate. Hell, he has a bio-force field. Han Yu didn't look back. He tapped his toes on the inner edge of the refrigerated truck and flipped out through the loading dock. His back scraped against the sheet metal, tearing his clothes, and his shoulder bone ached with numbness. His knees sank as he landed, and the sedatives in the black bag clinked crisply. They didn't break. He got up and ran. Behind him, the warehouse lights were fully illuminated, the red alarm light rotating, and the 3 thermal drones pulled up from the north side. The refrigerated truck driver stuck his head out, just about to curse, but Han Yu had already stepped over the hood of the truck and squeezed through a gap in the fence into the abandoned parking lot next door. The small terminal in his pocket vibrated. He looked down while running. The remote server window from earlier still had the last bit of cache left, and Nora Weir's signature flickered at the bottom of the screen. The financial path she had snatched was completely cut off, leaving behind only the verification code for the failure list he had finished downloading, and a map of the patrol blind spots outside the warehouse that she had forced into his device. The bottom line of text popped up. "Don't die, A19, I'm not done cursing at you yet." Han Yu turned into the space between two buildings, his back pressed against the damp brick wall, listening to the drone sweeping over his head. The black bag chafed his palms red, the 6 sedatives pressed against his chest, and the file folder stuck to his ribs, the edges of the paper digging in painfully. He stared at that line of text for 2 seconds and locked the terminal. Nora Weir. The name rolled on the tip of his tongue. In the distance, the alarm was still blaring, and Vought's headlights swept across the street corner one by one. Han Yu switched the black bag to his other hand, pulled up his collar, and walked into the darkness along the narrow alley marked on the patrol blind spot map. As the small terminal in his palm grew hot, Han Yu was crouching behind a dryer near the back door of the laundry room, dismantling a communicator. Vought vehicles were patrolling 3 streets away. The buzzing of drones pressed in waves, sounding as if they were scraping against his scalp. He stuffed the black bag into the gap behind the dryer, wrapped the 6 tranquilizers in an old towel, and pressed the file folder against his chest, its sharp paper edge digging painfully into his ribs. He inserted a small pair of surgical scissors into the crack of the communicator and pried open a thin wire. The headset crackled with static before a woman's hushed voice broke through. Public Relations confirms that the buzz surrounding the Robin incident is still rising, and the entries related to A-Train cannot be suppressed. The transfer window opens in 15 minutes. Target: Union Bank on New York's 8th Avenue. Homelander and Maeve are to enter via the Group B route. The camera crew is to be in position beforehand. Han Yu's fingers froze. The hijackers are live. The police on the scene are to maintain the perimeter. Do not let the regular patrol officers rush in. There are 17 hostages inside. The script is to be handled with 0 controllable casualties. Do not cut the live stream before Homelander arrives. Another male voice chuckled. Don't worry. Are there blanks in the guns? There are 3 real guns to create tension. Don't ask so many questions. Han Yu held the communicator to his ear, listening to the voices on the distant channel reporting coordinates, camera truck positions, and rescue slogans. Even the angle at which Homelander would land had been predetermined. He looked down at his palm. The stinging pain from the excessive golden energy spectrum lingered, feeling like tiny needles pricking at the edges of his palm lines. Vought was going to use a bank robbery to whitewash the Robin incident. They really know how to play. He pulled out the black bag, grabbed 1 tranquilizer to stuff into his inner pocket, and rewrapped the rest. On the screen of the small terminal, the map of patrol blind spots left by Nora Weir was still open. He swiped his finger across the map, zooming in on the underground maintenance tunnel next to the Union Bank on 8th Avenue. 15 minutes. Han Yu bit the edge of his glove and yanked it off, revealing his still reddened palm, then pushed the door open and slipped into the back alley. The live stream from the bank lobby had already begun. The robber had propped up a mobile phone next to the safe, its camera aimed at a row of kneeling hostages. Scattered across the marble floor were leaflets, broken glasses, and a crushed coffee cup. 17 people huddled in front of the counter, their hands covering their heads, holding back even the slightest cough. Police, get back, further back. The robber in a gray mask kicked the counter, his rifle sweeping across the lobby. His voice was hoarse from shouting, yet he forced it out, roaring at the phone, all of New York is watching. If those caped fools from Vought dare to come in, I'll kill one of them first. The live chat was scrolling frantically on the right side of the screen. Which bank is this? Where are the Vought heroes? Will Homelander come? There's a pregnant woman over there. She doesn't look well. Behind the counter, a pregnant woman in a beige coat curled into a ball, sweat from her forehead dripping onto the floor. One hand pressed against her stomach, the other clutching the sleeve of an elderly man beside her. Her lips were pale, and her voice was shaky as she gasped, I have a stomach ache. The old man tried to look up. Get down. A rifle butt slammed against the counter, sending wood splinters flying onto the pregnant woman's face. She flinched, her fingers clutching at empty air, leaving white scratches on the floor. A faint sound of metal scraping came from the ventilation shaft above the lobby. Han Yu lay in the narrow duct, his left shoulder brushing against the metal, the wound beginning to throb with numbness again. He inserted his surgical scissors into the vent screw. By the time he unscrewed the third one, the voice of Vought's dispatch was still droning on in his headset. Homelander is expected to arrive at the perimeter in 2 minutes. Maeve will enter from the roof. All cameras are to film the police's helplessness first, then cut to the hero's entrance. Han Yu looked down. There were 4 robbers in total. 2 were at the front entrance, their guns aimed at the hostages, 1 guarded the safe, with the live streaming phone set up at his feet, and the last one stood on the second-floor mezzanine, holding a remote control, with a bulge at his waist that looked like an explosive device. Analytical vision spread out along the steel beams, gun barrels, and the evacuation route for the hostages. The chandelier above the pregnant woman swayed slightly. In its glass reflection, the red light of the live streaming phone shone blindingly. Wait for Homelander. Bullshit. Han Yu kicked the ventilation grill open. The iron grate slammed onto the floor, and everyone looked up. The robber in the gray mask had barely managed half a curse when a shadow dropped from the ventilation shaft. A golden afterglow flashed across his shoulders and back like a line of fire traced by a blade. Fire. 3 bullets were fired at him. Han Yu snatched up a metal tray from the counter. As his wrist jolted, the tray took 3 bullet impacts, leaving dents and sending sparks flying onto his sleeve. He didn't retreat, but instead stepped onto the edge of the counter and lunged forward. He slammed the tray in his left hand into the first rifle and grabbed the barrel of the second with his right hand, twisting it downward. Snap! The gun barrel bent into scrap metal. Before the second robber could even see his face, Han Yu had kicked him in the knee, sending him sprawling to the floor. Han Yu grabbed the back of the robber's neck and pressed his face against the live streaming phone. The mask scraped against the screen, and the robber's ragged breathing hissed into the microphone. Who did you say was going to die just now? The robber choked out a broken sound. I. Finish the sentence. Han Yu pressed his palm down, and the glass of the counter cracked into a spiderweb pattern. The live streaming phone shook violently. The live chat paused for a heartbeat, then exploded in a frenzy. Holy shit, who just dropped down? He blocked the bullets. Sentinel, is that the guy from the subway video? The robber on the mezzanine cursed and pointed the remote at the pregnant woman, his thumb hooked over the red button. Han Yu's shoulder moved first. A low-level biofield expanded along his left arm, a thin layer of golden light bracing against the outside of the counter. The remaining gun muzzle by the safe had just raised when the golden light forced it half an inch off course. The bullet shattered the billboard behind the pregnant woman. Plastic fragments rained down. Terrified, the pregnant woman clutched at Han Yu's sleeve, her knuckles turning white. Don't let my baby. Look at me. Han Yu crouched down, his body shielding her from the line of fire. He lowered his voice, can you stand? The pregnant woman gritted her teeth and shook her head. Then crawl behind the counter. Take it slow, don't rush. He turned back and shouted to the security guard, you. Blue uniform, catch. The terrified security guard flinched, me. Yes, you. Kick those gun parts away and take them out through the side door. Pregnant woman first, then the elderly, keep the children in the middle. Han Yu kicked the disassembled bolt, magazine, and bent gun barrel over to him. The metal parts slid to the guard's feet. The guard stared at him for half a second, swallowed hard, picked up his radio, then put it back down and went to help the pregnant woman instead. Go, everyone, go. Stop filming, just go. No one listened to him entirely. At least 3 phones were still held up, capturing Han Yu's back through the gap in the counter, from behind pillars and in the reflection on the floor. He braced one hand against the counter, his bioforce field blocking the front entrance of the lobby, while his other hand grabbed the fallen robber's strap and hurled him toward his accomplice. Bang! The two collided in a heap. The robber guarding the safe grabbed the live streaming phone, pressing the gun barrel against the lens, his voice trembling, don't come any closer. If you take another step, I'll. Han Yu threw the metal tray. The tray spun through the air and struck his wrist. The phone flew into the air, the video feed spinning wildly. The last thing the stream captured was Han Yu rushing to the safe and slamming a fist into the robber's bulletproof vest. The man's back slammed against the safe, the air knocked out of him, and his gun slid to the floor. Ah! He collapsed to his knees. The robber on the mezzanine finally pressed the remote. There was no explosion. Han Yu looked up, holding a severed gray wire between his fingers. Before he had landed, analytical vision had already marked the remote signal receiver above the chandelier. The surgical scissors that had flicked out from his sleeve still had a piece of rubber insulation clinging to them. The robber on the mezzanine froze. When did you? Han Yu grabbed the broken gun barrel from the floor and hurled it upward. The steel pipe struck the man's elbow, knocking the remote from his hand. It tumbled twice along the railing before falling into the lobby. Han Yu leapt onto the counter, vaulted over the railing with his knee, and landed in front of the robber. The live stream has only been running for 3 minutes. He grabbed the man by the collar, dragged him off the mezzanine, and slammed him onto the lobby floor. Vought's rescue plan is quite rushed. The robber's pupils constricted sharply. This moment was captured clearly by the phone that had fallen nearby. The live chat was scrolling so fast it was impossible to read. Vought plan. Did he say Vought? Is this hijacking scripted? Don't cut the feed. Someone at the scene, keep filming. Who is he? Who is he? Who is he? By the side door, the hostages ran out one by one. The guard helped the pregnant woman, while the old man supported her arm. The pregnant woman looked back at Han Yu, wanting to say something, but a wave of abdominal pain forced her to double over. She could only let go of his crumpled sleeve. Han Yu looked at the crumpled fabric, and the stinging pain on the back of his hand flared up again. He kicked the remote away from the last robber's hand, then bent down to pick up the live streaming phone. The camera swept over the 3 robbers who had been taken down, as well as the one from the mezzanine who was still struggling on the floor. 17 hostages, all evacuated. 4 robbers, 3 real guns, and 1 fake explosive device. He paused, then turned the camera toward the side of his face. His hat brim was pulled low, revealing only his jawline and the residual golden light on his shoulder. And tell Vought not to write their scripts so thoroughly. Someone will always be on site to edit the draft. The sound of a helicopter approached from outside the bank, and the sirens were a chaotic mess. Han Yu placed the phone back on the counter. The screen was still lit, the comments scrolling like an explosion of white noise. The iron door at the roof entrance was kicked open. As Maeve walked in, her red cape brushed against the door frame, and her boots crunched over broken glass. She had been holding her hand up, as if preparing for a standard shot. But there was no screaming in the lobby, and no robbers grandstanding. There were only 3 masked men sprawled on the floor, a mess of gun parts, and the last robber from the mezzanine, who was gritting his teeth and reaching for the remote. Her hand froze in midair. Han Yu stood by the counter, his palms hanging at his sides, his fingertips still trembling slightly. The excessive energy spectrum had left his skin flushed red. After he retracted his low-level biofield, the fabric on his left shoulder tore open, revealing a bloody scrape. The robber on the floor had just brushed his fingertips against the edge of the remote when Han Yu kicked it away. Bang! The last robber's head smacked against the base of the counter, his eyes rolled back, and he passed out cold. Maeve looked at him. Her gaze swept from the gun barrels, to the side door where the pregnant woman had evacuated, to the live streaming phone, and finally landed on Han Yu's face. His face, beautiful to the point of sharpness, was expressionless, but a layer of weariness weighed on his eyes, as if he had just come from another, even worse scene. "You stole our job," she said. "You were late. I arrived on schedule. Then you should get a new dispatcher." Maeve's eyebrow twitched, as if she wanted to smile, but couldn't be bothered to. She glanced at the phone that was still live streaming and took a half step forward, her voice lowering. "Homelander will be here any second. If you leave through the back door now, you have 10 seconds. Han Yu looked at her. Analytical vision swept over her, displaying her strength, defense, fatigue load, and old injury pressure points one by one. There were no sickening mental fractures like Homelander's, nor the red tide of compound versus contamination that A-Train had. She was like a worn-down blade. The edge was still there, but the one wielding it had long since grown tired. "You're warning me. I'm warning the scene not to have another mess." She looked away and raised her hand to block a media camera that had just poked in. "Whether you leave or not is up to you." Han Yu bent down to pick up his surgical scissors, wiped off the rubber debris, and slid them back into his sleeve. "I owe you one." "Don't start," Maeve said coldly. "I didn't help you." The crowd outside suddenly erupted in cheers, and immediately, every camera turned toward the sky. The glass doors of the bank lobby creaked under the pressure of a powerful wind, and the leaflets on the floor swirled up, plastering themselves against the cracks in the counter. A sonic boom approached from the distance. Han Yu looked up through the shattered skylight and saw a red and blue cape descending from between the buildings. Homelander hovered above the bank entrance, his blonde hair perfectly neat, his smile as standardized as a billboard. His arms were spread wide, facing the arriving cameras. "Everyone, don't be afraid. The tips of his boots touched the steps, and his gaze pierced through the crowd, pinning itself onto the bank lobby. I'm here. The cheers from outside the glass door pressed into the lobby as Homelander's boot soles stepped onto the final stair. Crack. A fine fissure split the edge of the step. He was still smiling, his blonde hair unruffled, and as his cape fell, it was perfectly caught by 2 cameras at the most flattering angle. The perimeter police officers retreated, reporters held their microphones over the police line, and the flashes merged into a sea of white dots. Everyone stay calm, Vought will handle the scene. Homelander raised his hand, palm facing down, as if soothing a group of children waiting to be saved. His face was impeccably gentle when turned toward the cameras, but as his gaze passed through the shattered glass door and landed in the lobby, the smile remained on his face, yet his eyes turned cold. Han Yu stood by the counter, his old left shoulder wound still seeping blood, and the scorching redness on his palms not yet faded. Scattered firearm parts lay at his feet, and a live streaming phone leaned against the ground, the comments scrolling rapidly on its screen. Maeve stood half a step to his front side, dust staining the back of her hand. She didn't speak. Homelander pushed open the glass door, the hinges emitting a harsh, grating sound. He stepped into the bank lobby, looking first at the 4 unconscious robbers, then at the scattered magazines and the smashed billboard, and finally at Han Yu. You've been very proactive. It sounded like a compliment. The hairs on the back of Han Yu's neck stood on end, and his shoulder and back muscles tensed until they ached. Just as his analytical vision climbed onto Homelander's outline, it was forced back to the edge of his vision by a vast expanse of blinding red. Homelander. Strength. Exceeds low power audit limit. Speed. Exceeds low power audit limit. Defense. Exceeds low power audit limit. Mental stability. 31%. Hostility lock. High. Han Yu pressed his tongue against the roots of his teeth, nailing his foot to the spot when it nearly retreated. He didn't answer immediately, his gaze sweeping out through the side door. The pregnant woman had already been helped behind the police line by an elderly person, ambulance staff had just pushed over a stretcher, and a security guard was pulling the last 2 hostages to hide behind the vehicle. Just a little more. He turned his head to look at Maeve, his voice lowered, "The pregnant woman, she's yours." Maeve's eyelids twitched. "You're picky about the work. The one in her belly is more important than me." Maeve cursed under her breath and turned, striding toward the side door. When she passed by Han Yu, her shoulder armor brushed against his burnt, torn cuff, she paused for a half-beat, then forced herself to walk away. Homelander watched this scene, his smile thinning slightly. Rescue is certainly important. He raised his voice so all the microphones outside could pick it up, but there are regulations in the US, unregistered superhumans are not permitted to participate in high-risk rescues without authorization. Especially at scenes where firearms, explosives, and hostages are simultaneously present. He took a step forward. A small piece of the floor tile shattered. "What's your name? Registration number? Which team do you belong to?" Homelander continued to smile. "I hope you can give the public an explanation. Everyone has just experienced danger, and no one wants to see another loss of control." Han Yu raised his hand and pushed his hat brim up by half an inch. The cameras captured his jaw and blood-stained shoulder line, but not his full face. The live streaming phone on the ground was still lit, and the comments scrolled from, "Homelander is here," to, "This person just saved everyone." Han Yu's Adam's apple bobbed, and pain crawled from his palm up his arm in rhythmic pulses. He tucked the small terminal back into his inner pocket, confirming that the micro backup device was still stuck to the inside of the file bag. Vought manages commercial licensing for heroes, controls uniform colors, and dictates standing positions at press conferences. He looked at Homelander. Vought doesn't control who can pull a pregnant woman out from under the muzzle of a gun. Homelander blinked. Han Yu added, "And Vought isn't the registry for God." The cheers outside the lobby were cut short, dropping in volume. "Wow," a reporter gasped. Homelander's smile froze on his face, like a corrupted frame on an advertising screen. He turned his profile to the camera, his tone lighter. "Young man, you'd better think carefully before you speak." "I've thought about it quite clearly." Red light welled up from the depths of Homelander's eyes. Han Yu's pupils contracted, and his analytical vision traced the edges of the red light frantically. His low-level biofield only had time to press against his shoulder before, the next second, a wave of heat grazed his left shoulder. Sizzle. The suit fabric was burned through, and his skin burst into charred edges. Han Yu's teeth clenched with a dull thud, his right hand's 5 fingers slammed into a crack in the counter, knuckles turning white, and a shard of broken glass embedded into the side of his palm. He didn't retreat. All sound in the lobby cut out for a beat. The heat vision grazed past his shoulder, burning a red groove into the counter glass behind him, and the plastic sign curled and blackened. Sweat rolled down Han Yu's temple, hitting his chin. He kept his breathing short, his left shoulder muscles twitching, while short, golden sentry energy spectrum bursts lit up the edges of the wound, like a ring of tiny fire lines biting into the residual red light. Heat vision edge energy captured. Analysis progress, 1.7%. Sentry energy spectrum low power adaptation in progress. Damage. Left shoulder superficial carbonization, dermis tearing. It hurt so much his vision went white. Han Yu clenched his back molars, released his fingers from the counter, and stood straight again, inch by inch. The red light in Homelander's eyes hadn't dissipated, and the smile on his face was already hard to maintain. There were at least 6 cameras outside pointed at them, and the robber's live streaming phone was also on the ground, broadcasting the complete image of Han Yu not kneeling. Maeve helped the pregnant woman to the side door, then turned back upon hearing the sizzling sound. Her toes turned half an inch toward the lobby, her shoulders tensing as if she were about to rush over and block the middle. Homelander shot her a sidelong glance. Maeve stopped. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the stretcher, denting the metal pole. The pregnant woman was pale with fright, yet she still looked toward Han Yu, her lips trembling as she wanted to speak. "Don't look." Maeve pushed her toward the ambulance staff. "Get in the car." Han Yu saw Maeve's half-step, and he also saw her stop. He didn't call out to her. He couldn't drag her into this. He lowered his head, using his right hand to tear off the burnt fabric on his left shoulder. The fabric was stuck to his skin, and the moment he tore it away, his nose was filled with the smell of burnt flesh. Han Yu's shoulder twitched, then he turned toward the live streaming phone on the ground. The comments on the screen were exploding so fast the text was illegible. Did he just get hit by Homelander? Heat vision. I saw red light. So what if he's unregistered? He saved people. Vought's rescue plan is pretty rushed. What does that mean? Sentinel. It's definitely that Sentinel from the subway. Han Yu bent down and picked up the live streaming phone. The camera shook, aiming first at his charred shoulder, then at Homelander's perfect face outside the door. Saving people requires registration. Han Yu's voice was a bit hoarse. Then who registers the responsibility for the dead? The crowd outside erupted. What is he saying? The hostages were all evacuated just now, right? He saved them all. Why did Homelander shoot him? The police office's walkie-talkies blared chaotically, the ambulance door slammed shut, a helicopter pressed down from above the bank, and the wind sent files in the lobby tumbling across the floor. Homelander stood in place, his red and blue cape not moving a thread. But 2 more cracks appeared beneath his feet, crawling along the tile seams toward Han Yu's feet. He looked at Han Yu, the red light in his eyes receding. He hung the smile back on his face. The public will get an answer. Homelander turned to the camera, his voice returning to the brightness of a promotional video. Vought will cooperate with the police to investigate the entire process of this person's intervention at the scene. The most important thing today is the safety of the hostages. Everyone is safe now. That's good. Han Yu adjusted the phone camera back. Friends in the live stream, remember to save the archive. Homelander's smile nearly cracked. Maeve stood by the ambulance, watching Han Yu through the crowd. Her expression remained cold, yet her gaze lingered on his shoulder for a long time. Han Yu placed the phone back in its original position, not giving Homelander a second line of dialogue. He turned and walked toward the side door, his steps a little slower than usual. With every step, blood from his shoulder dripped down along the charred fabric, leaving a trail of dark red on the bank's tiles. Perimeter police tried to stop him, but were pushed aside by reporters and ambulance staff. The security guard from earlier suddenly stepped forward, kicked a scattered magazine to the officer's feet, and pointed at the robbers on the ground, shouting, "The guns are here. Look at the guns first. There are still people injured inside." Chaos ensued. Han Yu took advantage of these few seconds to slip through the narrow gap between the ambulance and the camera van, lowering his hat brim again. The burning pain in his left shoulder drilled into his bones in waves, and the analytical vision flickered intermittently in his field of vision, like a lamp running out of power. Behind him, Homelander's voice was still saying, "Investigation, safety, and procedure," to the cameras. But the comments had already changed their tune. Homelander backed down. Just finished saving people and got pressured with registration. He didn't kneel. The Sentinel didn't kneel. Han Yu turned into the shadows behind the ambulance, raising his hand to press against his shoulder wound. Blood leaked from between his fingers, dripping onto the small terminal's casing. The screen lit up, displaying half of Nora Weir's patrol blind spot map, before he pressed it off. At the bank entrance, Homelander was still smiling. Maeve held the ambulance door, not getting in. She looked through the crowd at the back, disappearing into the shadows of the vehicles, her fingertips still resting on the stretcher pole she had bent. Han Yu didn't look back. He only gripped his blood-stained gloves tightly, squeezing between the sirens and the crowd. Behind him, the last live streaming phone was still lit, the red recording dot pulsing beside the broken glass. Vought's wanted poster plastered every street side screen before the morning rush hour. Han Yu's profile was edited to look menacing. Half his face was hidden in the shadows behind the shattered bank glass, his left shoulder glowing with residual golden light, and at his feet lay the rifle parts of the robbers, twisted like pretzels. The subtitles rolled by line after line, white text on a red background, with a tone that sounded like he had already been sentenced. Unregistered dangerous superhuman. Codename suspected to be Sentinel. If any citizen spots the target, please maintain distance and call the police immediately. At the bus stop, a middle-aged man holding a paper bag stared at the screen for a few seconds and took a half step back. This guy was at the bank yesterday, right? The old woman beside him pulled her shopping cart closer. If they say he's dangerous, then he must be dangerous. But I watched the livestream. The young clerk at the convenience store entrance lowered his voice. He got that pregnant woman out. Homelander was just standing there talking about protocol. The old woman didn't reply and just shifted her gaze away from the screen. The screen cut back to the bank footage. Vought's PR team had boosted the residual golden light by 3 times, making it look like the precursor to some kind of uncontrolled energy explosion. The firearm fragments were circled separately, accompanied by tags like violent tendencies and property destruction. The few seconds featuring the pregnant woman, the robbers, livestream, and Homelander's heat vision grazing his shoulder were all edited out. A dirty edit. Han Yu stood inside the back door of an abandoned laundromat in the old district. He glanced through the oil-stained glass twice, then raised his hand to bolt the door shut. His shirt on his left shoulder had stuck to the wound, the edges of the fabric charred and stiff. The heat vision had only grazed him, leaving a shallow groove, but Homelander's energy was too overbearing. The charred flesh kept seeping blood. The blood would dry only to be soaked open by sweat again, forming a dark, hard crust. The small terminal rested on the lid of a washing machine, its screen displaying half a map of patrol blind spots. Han Yu bit down on a roll of gauze and gripped the tear in his shirt with his right hand. Rip. As the fabric tore an inch away from the wound, his vision went black for a moment, and his knee hit the side of the washing machine with a metallic clatter. Hiss. Nora Weir's voice came through the earpiece, accompanied by static. That just now. I could feel the pain through the camera. Do you even know how to treat a wound? Han Yu spat out the gauze, his voice slightly hoarse. Will I die? At this rate, you won't die, but the scarring will be consistently ugly. Nora's typing speed was rapid. Second shelf on the right, there's an expired first aid kit. Don't be picky, you're not in a position to choose brands right now. Han Yu rummaged through the shelves and found a plastic box, its lid covered in dust. He used a small pair of surgical scissors to pry open the seal. Inside, the antiseptic cotton pads were half dried, and the hemostatic powder had caked into a lump. Fine. He pulled his shirt down a bit further, giving himself no room for hesitation this time. The charred fabric peeled away along with the flesh, and the pain shot from his shoulder straight to the back of his neck, his teeth gnashing against the gauze until it squeaked. Analytical vision flickered at the edge of his vision. Heat vision edge energy capture, 1.7%. Left shoulder burn. Superficial tissue damage, continuous bleeding. Low-level bio field, unstable. Han Yu stared at the word, unstable, and poured the hemostatic powder on. As the powder touched the wound, the muscles in his shoulder and back tightened instantly. He braced his fingers against the washing machine lid until his knuckles turned white. In the earpiece, Nora suddenly paused for 2 seconds. There's a car. Han Yu looked up. I've tapped into the camera outside the convenience store. 2 patrol cars, and a gray SUV with Vought contracted security at the street corner. No markings on the roof, but the license plate is in the internal database. Nora lowered her voice. They're scanning along the range of your blood trail. You didn't clean up properly when you left the bank, handsome. Thanks for the compliment. Bullshit. You're like a stray dog that doesn't know how to hide from the rain, dripping blood everywhere. Han Yu wrapped the gauze around his shoulder and tied a knot with one hand. The knot was crooked, so he used his teeth to bite one end and pull it tight, a muffled grunt of pain squeezing from his throat. Outside, the sound of tires rolling over a puddle drifted in. Nora said again, "Go out the back door, turn left into the alley. Leave within 30 seconds. I can loop the convenience store camera for 20 minutes, but that one at the street corner belongs to Vought. If I touch it, it will trigger an alarm." Copy that. Han Yu grabbed the small terminal, stuffed it into his inner pocket, and picked up his black jacket. As the left shoulder of the jacket landed, he paused, then readjusted the jacket to hide the bloodstain in the shadows. As the door opened, the damp smell of the old district and the sour stench of trash cans rushed in. He walked along the alley wall, his steps steady as if he weren't injured, only his left hand remained hanging, his fingertips occasionally twitching. The sound from the street side screens poured into the alley entrance, with the Vought anchorwoman repeating in a crisp voice, "Please cooperate with the investigation, citizens." Just as Han Yu reached the end of the alley, another person appeared beside the dumpster ahead. Maeve was leaning against the wall, holding a flat liquor bottle. She was in casual clothes, a dark coat covering the outline of her battle suit, her boot tips resting on broken glass. The red light from the screens flashed into the alley, illuminating her face, alternating between bright and dark. She raised her hand. A small bottle flew over. Han Yu caught it with his right hand and looked down. Antiseptic spray, unopened. Do you guys in the 7 hand out first aid supplies when catching people? He tucked the spray into his pocket. Maeve stared at his shoulder. Don't think of yourself as too special. Vought treats you as a walking accident, and Homelander treats you as a nuisance stealing his spotlight. If you appear in front of the camera again, he will burn right through you. He tried yesterday. Yesterday there was a live stream, a pregnant woman, and reporters. Maeve raised the bottle to her lips, then lowered it. Next time, there won't be. A pedestrian passed by the alley entrance. They paused upon seeing Maeve's back, but were driven away by the look on her profile. No one dared to pull out their phone. Han Yu stepped closer, blood from his shoulder seeping down along the gauze. He didn't explain who started it in the bank, nor was he in a rush to prove how many people he had saved. Flight 37. Maeve's fingers tightened around the liquor bottle, and the bottle emitted a faint cracking sound. It was very soft, but Han Yu heard it. The cold hardness was still on her face, but the layer of drunkenness in her eyes was stripped away, revealing a sliver of sharp vigilance. She stared at Han Yu, as if judging where he had dug up this phrase and how much else he was hiding. Who told you? Guess. Han Yu. Maeve called his name for the first time, her voice very low. You've got a lot of nerve using this to negotiate with me. We'll discuss terms later. Do you have proof? Han Yu looked at her hand. The glass of the liquor bottle had been squeezed until it cracked, and the liquid seeped out from the fissures, dripping down between her fingers. She was waiting for a confirmation. She was afraid he had it, and she was afraid he didn't. Outside the alley, the siren of a patrol car circled in from the distance, 2 streets away, its sound still muffled. Nora cursed in the earpiece. Why did you stop? Is there someone in front of you? Don't tell me it's Homelander. Han Yu raised his hand and muted the earpiece. Maeve saw this action, and her eyebrows twitched. You have an accomplice. Living people have to have a few friends. Vought will dig them all out. They'd have to know where to dig first. Han Yu took out the antiseptic spray and pressed it twice against his shoulder. The medicine stung into the wound, the veins on his forehead jumped, but he didn't stop talking. I'm not interested in judging you right now. I'm just asking if you still want to be a hero for once. Maeve didn't speak. The wanted broadcast on the screens was still playing, with the host emphasizing, high risk, unregistered, and violent. The sound echoed into the alley, pressing in between the two of them. Han Yu snapped the cap back onto the spray. In the bank, you got the pregnant woman to the side door. Your movements were fast, and the route was clean. You know how to save people. Maeve looked down at the liquor bottle, her thumb brushing over the crack, glass shards sticking to her finger pads. She threw the bottle into the trash can with a bang, shattering the bottom. Don't put labels on me. I'm stating facts. Facts. She gave a cold laugh. The fact is that you're now on the VOD wanted list. Homelander isn't happy, and Ashley and her bunch will take every frame of your footage and re-edit it. After tonight, there will be 100 versions online saying you threatened hostages, saying you colluded with the robbers, saying the golden light on your shoulder will contaminate ordinary people. It's already started. Then why are you still wandering the streets? Han Yu pulled the small terminal halfway out of his inner pocket, its screen displaying the flickering patrol blind spot map. I'm hiding. The results are mediocre. Maeve's gaze fell on the screen, then withdrew. She didn't ask who Nora was, nor did she ask where the blind spot map came from. The sound of the patrol car grew closer. Han Yu's analytical vision climbed to the alley entrance, marking 2 cameras, 1 VOT contracted vehicle mounted lens, and the police lights flickering in the reflection of the convenience store glass. Maeve turned her head to look, the trace of fatigue on her face covered up by cold hardness again. Do you know what mentioning Flight 37 will provoke? I know. Homelander will personally drag you out of the sewer. He already wants to do that now. Maeve stared at him for 2 seconds, then suddenly raised her hand toward the top of the alley entrance. The surveillance camera in the corner, along with its mount, was crushed into a lump of scrap metal by her, the wires sparking. She didn't smash it with force, just let go, and the broken shell fell into the sewage next to the trash can. 10 minutes. She pulled a hemostatic patch from her coat pocket and threw it to Han Yu. Go toward the back street, don't pass by the subway entrance. The VOT vehicle-mounted cameras will resynchronize in 9 minutes, that's the longest I can delay them. Han Yu caught the hemostatic patch, the corner of the packaging digging into his palm. Maeve. She had already turned around, her shoulder line straight, yet her back carried the scent of alcohol and weariness. Han Yu stuck the hemostatic patch inside his jacket but didn't leave immediately. About Flight 37, I will come find you again. Maeve's steps paused for a beat. Don't come with injuries next time. She didn't look back. The smell of blood is too easy to track. Thanks. Don't get ahead of yourself. I just don't want to see Homelander go crazy today. She walked out of the alley and raised her hand to stop the first patrol car. The window rolled down, and just as the officer was about to speak, Maeve tossed her the 7 ID in front of him, her tone cold enough to scrape off paint. I'm taking over this area. You go to the main street to block people. Han Yu heard the officer stammering in response, then turned and slipped into the deeper shadows of the back street. The earpiece resumed transmission, and Nora's voice exploded back. You muted me just now. You muted me. Do you have any idea I almost thought you were pinned against a wall by some caped freak? Han Yu walked while tearing open the hemostatic patch packaging. I ran into Maeve. There was a 1-second pause on the other end. The Maeve from the 7. Yeah, she didn't kill you. Han Yu pressed the hemostatic patch over the bleeding gauze, his shoulder flinching back from the pain, but he spat out 2 words, temporarily. The small terminal vibrated in his palm. A new notification popped up on the Hero Popularity Stats panel. Relationship tag updated. Maeve. Original classification. Member of the 7, high-risk contact object. New classification. Leverageable variable. Han Yu glanced at it and tapped the screen to darken it. Outside the alley, Vought's wanted poster was still looping his profile, the red headline reflected in the sewage, crushed by footsteps. He turned into the back street, his left shoulder still bleeding, the hemostatic patch wrapper in his hand crumpled into a small ball. Behind him, Maeve stood in front of the patrol car, not looking back. When a train's back slammed into the treadmill handle, the entire machine sank slightly into the floor. The rubber belt was still running, with the speed display frozen at 320. The red numbers flashed garishly, like a row of tiny alarms. Homelander had one hand pressed onto his shoulder, his smile directed at the surveillance camera in the corner of the training room, his voice kept very low. You run so fast. He lowered his head and leaned in closer. Why didn't you bring A-19 back? A-trains Adam's apple bobbed, his soul scraping against the edge of the running belt, nearly getting pulled in. He raised his hand to steady himself on the metal rack beside him, but Homelander's fingers pressed down, causing his shoulder blade to emit a dull thud. I chased him, but he slipped into the crowd. The subway tunnels were too chaotic, there was a subway accident, and the surveillance cameras were cut too. A-train's speech was so fast it was breathless. I wasn't in the right state at the time, the drug's effect, the post-training recovery drug didn't stabilize. Recovery drug. Homelander repeated it, as if tasting the name of a dessert. He grabbed A-Train's wrist and pushed up the sleeve. Several needle marks were clustered on the skin, the old ones bruised and the new ones still showing red spots. The training room went quiet. The smart punching bag by the wall automatically returned to its position, and the mechanical arm stopped in midair. A-Train stared at the eagle on Homelander's chest, his fingertips trembling slightly before he clenched his hand into a fist. The doctor gave it to me. Which doctor? The team doctor, a temporary one, I didn't catch the name. I really didn't. Homelander looked up. A-Train swallowed the rest of his sentence, his lips pressed into a thin line. You let an experimental subject, a wanted Compound V failure, run around outside. Homelander smiled as he straightened the sleeve for him. Do you know how much the public loves stories like this? They'll say the Seven can't even catch a wounded rat. I'll make up for it. Of course you will. Homelander's palm patted his face. The force wasn't heavy, but A-Train's head was knocked to the side. Next time, don't make me clean up your mess. The running belt suddenly accelerated, and A-Train's knees went weak, nearly causing him to lunge forward. He braced himself hard, sweat sliding from his temple to his chin. Homelander had already turned and walked toward the door, his cape sweeping across the floor, and the training room door closed behind him. Click. A-Train stood for 2 seconds, then slammed the stop button on the treadmill, hunching over while holding onto the metal rack beside him. The heart rate monitor patch vibrated below his chest, and his phone simultaneously popped up an anonymous notification. Heart rate, 172. Suggestion: don't die in the training room. Under the bridge, Hanyu propped his small terminal on his knees, having applied another layer of the hemostatic patch given by Maeve over the gauze on his left shoulder. Dampness seeped up from the cement cracks, and when the train passed, the bridge structure hummed, vibrating his wound with every pulse of pain. He didn't turn off the monitor. The sound of panting from A-Train's headset came through intermittently, mixed with the low hum of the training room's ventilation system. Hanyu used a small surgical scissor to pry open an old communicator, connecting the copper wires inside to a micro backup device. On the screen, Homelander's voice print was captured as red waveforms, with a panel prompt hanging next to it. Target: A-Train. Mental stability, 31%. Compound versus contamination. High risk fluctuation. Elimination risk, rising. After reading it, Hanyu tapped a line of text on his phone with his thumb. Stay steady. If you want to live, give me new chips. Send. 3 seconds later, the sound of a phone vibrating came through the monitor. A-Train didn't reply immediately. On his end, there was only breathing and the sound of a water cup being knocked over. He cursed very quietly. Hanyu leaned against the bridge pier, turning the screen brightness down to the minimum. Outside the bridge tunnel, the red light of the VOD wanted poster flickered in across the water, with the A-19 designation repeatedly scrolling across the advertising screen. 2 black SUVs drove over the bridge, their tires rolling over the joints, the sound like short, sharp gun bolts. Norris Channel popped in. Are you still feeding that running dog? He still bites his master. He'll bite you too. That's why I keep him on a leash. Hanyu, you sound like a villain. Thanks for the compliment. There was a clattering of keyboards from the other end, and Nora hummed. Don't be cheeky. A-Train's location was just at the 7-tower training level. He was cornered alone by Homelander. Guess what he'll do now? Hanyu stared at the message box on the screen that hadn't moved for a while. Look for a door to survive. The phone vibrated. A-Train sent an encrypted audio file, followed by 2 coordinates, a license plate number, and a blurry photo of a warehouse exterior wall. In the bottom left corner of the photo was an old Osborne Group shipping logo, the gray paint peeling, and the warehouse number was half covered with black tape. In the audio, A-Train's voice was kept very low. This is the chip you wanted. Someone from the VOD Adult Project team is bypassing official channels to meet with people from the Osborne periphery tonight, no, tomorrow early morning. The cargo is called black fluid. They say it can stabilize the Compound V protocol and reduce the crash rate. The location is at the Osborne Peripheral Warehouse, the south side cold chain door. He paused for a moment, as if checking the door. I didn't participate, I just heard it. Don't throw me away, A-19. Homelander has already targeted me. Hanyu dragged the audio into the local sandbox, and his analytical vision swept along the waveform. In the background, there was the sound of an elevator announcing floors, coffee machine steam, and a blurry male voice mentioning, cold chain box, and, black core sample adaptation. The information was real. He tossed the coordinates to Nora. Check the exterior power supply, cameras, and cold chain logistics. Yo, ordering me around. Please. Too late, no sincerity. Despite her complaints, the window already popped up a 3-layered map. The floor plan of the Osborne peripheral warehouse was broken down into gray and white lines by her, with 2 red crosses marked next to the south cold chain door. The warehouse is registered under a shell shipping company, and the entry and exit records for the last 3 weeks have been wiped. There's an independent fiber optic line here, bypassing the main Osborne building and connecting to the old R&D park. Han Yu's finger stopped on the 4 words, black fluid. The old files on black core symbiosis popped up on the edge of the panel. Black veins, tentacles, protective tissue, swallowing gunfire, sealing wounds. To stabilize the Compound V protocol, Vought dared to shove this kind of thing into living people. He backed up the audio into 3 cloud safes and replied to A-Train. Continue to stay in the 7. Internal meetings, adult projects, Homelander's movements, send everything to me. A-Train replied almost instantly. Do you want me to die? Han Yu typed quickly. If you quit now, Homelander will dismantle you first. If you stay inside, I'll give you a way to live. There was no movement on the other end. Another train passed over the bridge tunnel, and dust fell from the concrete ceiling onto Han Yu's shoulder. He raised his hand to brush it off, his fingertips touching the edge of the gauze. The bleeding had stopped, but the burning pain from the wound remained. Nora's voice lowered a bit. Are you really planning to protect him? Protect him to pass on information. Don't beat around the bush. Robin almost died. Huey's father almost signed a non-disclosure agreement. How many people were smashed by A-Train, erased by Vought? If you keep him, the traffic won't look good. Han Yu copied that audio clip of A-Train to an offline drive, pressing his thumb against the casing. He needs to pay the bill. Nora didn't respond, but a living A-Train can flip the ledger. Han Yu looked at the red wanted light outside the bridge tunnel. If one member of the 7 dies, Vought can hold a press conference, cry for 10 minutes, and then pin the blame on A-19. Keep him inside, and the adult project, black fluid, and Osborne deals will all leak out. The sound of current crackled. Fine. Nora's tone hardened again. You'd better not get bitten back by the dog you're raising. When that happens, I'll laugh very loudly, and by the way, cut your dark history into a compilation. Do you have any? I can make it up on the spot. Han Yu chuckled, which pulled at his shoulder wound, and the smile quickly faded. On the small terminal, a public news feed was casually pushed over by Nora. The official Vought account was looping a new clip. In the 7-tower lobby, Ashley stood before the microphone with a professional smile, introducing the new member about to complete the onboarding process. Starlight Annie. The scene cut to backstage. A young girl stood in front of the mirror, her white and gold uniform hugging her shoulder lines, her cape not yet fastened. She raised her hand to adjust her collar, stopping for a half-beat when her fingertips touched the star-shaped emblem on her chest. Her face in the mirror was a bit tense, but her eyes were bright and clear. Tonight, the 7 will welcome a new light symbolizing hope. The host's voice was sickeningly sweet. Han Yu stared at the screen, his finger tapping the pause button. Starlight Annie's name scrolled in the news headline, labeled with tags like, Dream Come True, All-American Vote, and, Pure Hero. In his mind flashed the closed door from the original plot, the Deep's greasy face, and Vought's PR department's disgustingly clean press releases. The sound of water dripped in the bridge tunnel. Nora Weir, add Starlight Annie to the priority monitoring list. The new one. She looks quite happy. She stepped into the 7-tower today. Nora's typing slowed by half a beat. What do you know? I know Vought treats newcomers like products to be unwrapped. Be specific. Han Yu shrank the news window and opened the 7-tower's internal schedule. Onboarding process, image shooting, member meetings, media rehearsals, all packed full. The Deep's name had appeared once in the 3 p.m. slot, then was deleted by someone. The traces of the deletion were still there. Watch the Deep first, Han Yu said. As soon as he approaches Starlight Annie, record it, video, audio, access logs, take as much as you can. Are you saving someone, or hoarding ammunition? Both. Tisk, greedy, you just met me. Nora chuckled, very briefly, as if suppressing some emotion. Fine, Starlight Annie added to priority monitoring. Also, the security map for the Osborne peripheral warehouse is incomplete. Someone in the gray market is selling temporary access routes, you can ask about it at the Superhuman bar. Han Yu dragged the coordinates sent by A Train, Starlight Annie's schedule, and the black fluid keywords into the same task folder. The hero popularity value panel popped up a new notification. Hidden link updated. Compound V Protocol, Black Fluid, Osborne Peripheral Warehouse. Insider tag. A Train. Potential victim warning. Starlight Annie. Fate rewrite value triggerable node, not activated. Han Yu looked at the words, not activated, and closed the small terminal. Outside the bridge tunnel, a homeless person pushed a shopping cart past, the wheels getting stuck on the curb, clattering loudly. He looked up and saw Han Yu in the shadows, then saw the wanted profile on the screen in the distance, his mouth opening. Han Yu held up a finger to his lips. The homeless man froze for 2 seconds, yanked the shopping cart forward, and muttered as he walked away. Where to now? Nora asked. Han Yu stuffed the offline drive into his inner jacket pocket and shouldered his black bag. His left shoulder was still a bit stiff. He flexed his fingers, and his analytical vision pulled up several safe routes at the bridge exit. The Superhuman bar. You're going to a place like that with a wanted face. They recognize me, so the information sells faster. Your social life is really sick. Han Yu stepped out of the bridge tunnel, the red wanted light shining on his jaw, only to be suppressed by his hood. He took one last look at his phone. A-Train sent another message. I gave you the chips, you have to give me a guarantee too. Han Yu replied with 4 words. Continue to live. After sending it, he turned off the screen and walked along the shadows under the bridge toward the gray district. In the distance, the bar sign was half broken, with only the blue neon flashing in the mist. The bar door sprang shut behind Han Yu, the door hinge emitting a dry creak. The old television above the bar was still looping VOD news. On screen, his wanted poster had been cropped into a black silhouette on a red background, with the designation A19 taking up half the screen. The anchor reminded citizens in a very standard tone to stay away from the dangerous target, and the next second, the camera cut to a promotional video of Starlight Annie about to complete her onboarding process. The same screen, 2 different treatments. Han Yu pushed his hood back half an inch, revealing half his face. In the corner, 2 peripheral agents in leather jackets didn't move while holding their glasses, but their eyelids lifted simultaneously. The tall, thin man near the dart machine lowered his head to cough, his fingers sliding across his phone screen under the table. Someone else flipped over a betting card, revealing the name written in marker on the back, A19. Congratulations. Less than 10 seconds after entering, your bounty has already been forwarded 3 times, Nora's voice was very low in the earpiece. Left booth, gray suit. Right rear, bald guy. Third person at the bar, hand under the table, might be filming you. Han Yu sat at the edge of the bar and placed the black bag at his feet. His left shoulder brushed against the chair back, and the burn under the gauze felt like it had been pricked by a needle tip. He didn't frown. Give me a glass of water. The bartender looked at him twice, his hand stopping at the mouth of a whiskey bottle. Water. Iced. The bartender pushed the glass over, the bottom hitting the wooden counter with a thud. The surrounding noise skipped a beat, only to be quickly drowned out by the music again. People here were used to pretending to be blind, deaf, and pretending everyone had a legal identity. VOD's hero contracts, underground drugs, temporary routes, hush money, and black market agents all changed hands in places like this. Han Yu tapped the side of the glass with his fingertip. Analytical vision spread out along the bar, camera blind spots, the back door lock cylinder, and the stress points of the fish tank glass all lit up at the edge of his vision. The ornamental fish tank against the wall occupied the entire partition, blue lights illuminating a dozen tropical fish, with white sand and plastic coral covering the bottom of the tank. As the seller for that temporary Osborne route here. Checking. Don't rush. People in the gray market are stubborn, but money and fists can both make them talk. You'd better not right now. The bar door opened again. A wave of perfume with a fishy, oceanic scent surged in first. The Deep was wearing casual clothes, his jacket open, with the Sevens commemorative chain hanging around his neck. He was followed by 2 young lackeys, one holding a phone and the other holding an autograph board, both wearing that look of excitement that said, "I walked in with a big shot." Yo. The Deep scanned the room, and when his gaze fell on Han Yu, his footsteps stopped. Looking as if he had just seen something amusing, he patted the shoulder of the lackey beside him. Look who's here. No one answered. The music in the bar was still playing, the bass vibrating the glass rack, and the bartender's movements as he wiped the glass slowed down. The Deep picked up an unfinished drink from the bar that someone else had left, downed it, and liquor smeared from the corner of his lips to his chin. He slammed the glass onto the counter and walked toward Han Yu. The unregistered monster, the one from VOT News. He pointed at the TV. You're thinner than in the photo. What's wrong? Is living under a bridge comfortable? Han Yu picked up the iced water and took a sip. The cold suppressed the metallic taste of blood in his throat. The Deep laughed even louder. Don't play it cool, brother. Do you know what I hate most? Ordinary people. They applaud you today, and tomorrow they'll sell you to the bounty hotline. That pregnant woman in the bank, right? She definitely cried and said you saved her, then turned around and saw the $50,000 bounty. Tisk, her hands were faster than anyone's. Someone by the bar stifled a laugh. Others raised their phones a little higher. The Deep leaned in, his eyes filled with the stench of alcohol and malice. Ordinary people are just like that, they love to applaud monsters. When the monster bites, they scream for the seven to save them. Don't you think that's ridiculous? Han Yu set the water glass back on the counter. Are you done? Not yet. The Deep reached out to pat his shoulder. I heard you even dared to make eye contact with Homelander. Are you truly crazy, or did Compound V fry your brain? Someone like you who leaked out of a lab. Bang! The heavy-bottomed glass smashed into the Deep's chin, the sound crisp enough to overpower the music. The Deep recoiled, his teeth clashing with a dull thud. Liquor and ice cubes flew out, hitting the lackey's autograph board. The lackey's mouth hung open, phone still raised, with only half of the Deep's distorted face remaining on the screen. Han Yu stood up. The movement tore his left shoulder wound, and a hot pain radiated from under the gauze. His right hand had already gripped the back of the Deep's neck, a layer of golden light from his low-level biofield rising around his knuckles. With a brief press, the Deep's knees hit the floor. You mother F. Han Yu dragged him by the back of his neck, pushing him toward the fish tank. Several chairs in the bar were knocked over. The lackey lunged forward half a step, but was nailed to the spot by a glance from Han Yu. That look held no anger, only the calculation of distance and fracture angles. Don't move. 2 words, enough. The Deep struggled, grabbing the frame of the fish tank, veins bulging on the back of his hands. After all, he was a member of the Seven and significantly stronger than an ordinary superhuman. He arched his back violently, nearly pushing Han Yu away. Han Yu planted his feet, his analytical vision locking onto the leverage point of the Deep's spine, and he slammed his right elbow down. Thud. The Deep's face was pressed into the water. The school of fish scattered, and the white sand churned up. The glass partition couldn't withstand the force of the two, and cracks crawled outward from near the Deep's temple with a few sharp clicks, like a dense web. The whole room went quiet. Only the fish tank filter was still humming. The Deep thrashed in the water, palms slapping the glass, bubbles surge out from his mouth. He tried to lift his head, but Han Yu held the back of his neck and pressed down for another 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Han Yu let go. The Deep fell back onto the floor, coughing until his whole face turned red, water dripping from his hair and collar. He pointed at Han Yu, his lips trembling twice, and just as he was about to curse, he vomited a mouthful of fish tank water from his throat. Shut up, save some oxygen. Han Yu pulled out a tissue and wiped the water off the back of his hand. An oceanic hero nearly drowning in an ornamental tank, that's quite an expensive story to tell. Behind the bar, the bartender's Adam's apple bobbed. The agents by the dart machine tucked their phones under the table, their movements slower than ever, but their expressions were much more disciplined than before. Lamplighter sat in the deepest shadow of the bar, the drink in front of him untouched from start to finish. He had originally been leaning back against the chair, as if watching a boring farce. Now, his fingers paused at the rim of the glass, his gaze falling on the layer of golden light still lingering on Han Yu's shoulder. The agent beside him lowered his voice. Should we report this to VOT? Lamplighter picked up his glass, sniffed it, but didn't drink. The label VOT gave him is too cheap. Compound V failure. A failure can't withstand the edge of Homelander's heat vision, let alone press the Deep into a fish tank. Lamplighter put the glass down. This guy's price tag needs to be rewritten. Don't count him as a fugitive, count him as a tradable disaster. The agent's finger froze on the message box. On the other side, the bar speakers screeched. The dance floor lights flickered, the originally low music was cut off, and Nora's voice emerged from all directions, accompanied by electrical static. Han Yu, your social style is like a demolition crew. A reminder, the fish tank you just smashed is priced at 4,800. Counting the fish, the bar owner might cry. Everyone looked up at the speakers. Han Yu threw the wet tissue into the trash can. Open the back door before you start scolding me. It's open. The back door magnetic lock will deactivate in 30 seconds, the surveillance loop is 90 seconds. Nora paused for half a second, the sound of typing squeezing through the earpiece. Also, I've sent you 2 gifts. Han Yu's phone vibrated. The screen lit up. The first was a list of peripheral agents at the bar, with names, common numbers, transaction habits, and gray transfer records to the VOT PR department marked in red. The few people who were filming under the table earlier were all on it, and there was a note under the gray suit's name, selling temporary routes to the Osborne Perimeter Warehouse, updated after 3 p.m. The second was the security map of the Osborne Perimeter Warehouse. The previously missing south cold chain door was filled in, and next to 2 red X's, patrol times, thermal sensor angles, and independent fiber optic maintenance well locations were added. A thin line was also drawn on the old R&D park end, marked, black fluid samples suspected to be transported via this route. Han Yu's thumb paused at the edge of the screen, his eyes lowering. Worth it. The Deep was still sitting on the floor panting, hearing the female voice from the speakers, his face turned blue and then pale. He pushed himself up from the ground, his wet clothes clinging to his body, looking as disheveled as if he had just crawled out of a sewer. You dare to touch someone from the 7. He gritted his teeth. Vought will. Han Yu turned around. The second half of the Deep's sentence stuck in his throat. Han Yu walked up to him and reached out to straighten the crooked commemorative chain for him, his movements steady and his voice not loud. Go back and tell Ashley, I'm taking this black fluid lead. If she wants to silence me, she should prepare a second fish tank first. The Deep's hand raised halfway, then lowered. Tisk. Han Yu picked up the black bag, and as he passed the gray-suited agent, he knocked on his table. The route. The gray suit broke out in a sweat, scrambling to push a temporary access code card over. The south cold chain door can only be used once, valid until 11 p.m. tonight. Also the maintenance well, don't go through the front door. Han Yu put the card away. The hero popularity metric panel popped up a prompt at the edge of his vision. Gray market shock value increased. The 7-member mental break value, the deep blue level triggered. Black fluid trade route, locked. In the shadow of the bar, Lamplighter took out his phone and photographed Han Yu's departing back, without using the flash. In the speakers, Nora laughed again. 10 seconds to the back door. Han Yu, someone has started to requote your price. Han Yu pushed open the back door, and cold wind poured in from the alley. He looked back at the watery floor, the cracked fish tank, and the Deep who was still coughing up water. Make them line up. When Han Yu pushed open the door at the end of the 3rd floor of the motel, the door chain was only half latched. Half of the fluorescent tubes in the room were broken, and the remaining bedside lamp flickered on and off like an old television on its last breath. A dozen pages of printouts were spread across the table, their corners curled from the dampness, densely covered with serial numbers, ages, injection batches, and death remarks. Compound V failure list. A laptop next to it had its back cover removed, the fan exposed, and data cables trailed from the edge of the table onto the carpet. The screen displayed white text on a black background, running a remote verification window. The woman standing by the window turned around. She was much colder than she sounded over the voice chat. Her black hair was soaked by the rain, clinging to the sides of her face, and the hem of her coat was still dripping. She held a tiny memory card between her fingers, her knuckles white and tense, and her first sentence sounded like a razor blade scraping across glass. You are even more trouble than you looked on the surveillance. Han Yu closed the door behind him without replying. He placed the black bag against the wall, first tapped the door lock with the back of his finger, then crouched to check under the bed. Under the bed, there was only a ball of old socks and half an empty beer can. The curtain gap. He walked over, used 2 fingers to pull it slightly apart, and outside, the neon sign flashed, vacancy. There were 3 cars in the parking lot. The window of the pickup truck on the far side was fogged up, with no one in sight. You asked me to meet you here, and you chose this hellhole yourself. Han Yu let go of the curtain, and you're calling me trouble. It's cheap, the cameras are old, and the owner takes cash. Nora pressed the memory card onto the tabletop and pushed it 2 centimeters toward him. As her sleeve slid down, a flat stun gun was revealed. She saw Han Yu's gaze land on it, and instead of hiding it, she simply placed the stun gun next to the printouts. Click. I have no intention of pretending to be harmless, she said, and you shouldn't pretend to be a good guy either. Han Yu pulled out a chair but didn't sit. He looked down and scanned the first page of the list, and the hero popularity value panel popped up a few small prompts at the edge of his vision. Compound V experimental project. List fragment matching. Survival probability field missing. Black fluid trading route correlation, medium. He placed the temporary access card on the table. The cold chain door on the south side of the outer Osborne warehouse, valid until 11 p.m. tonight. You give me the coordinates of the survivors on the list, and I'll take you to tap into the warehouse's external lines. Nora stared at the card, not taking it immediately. What about protection terms? You don't sell my location to Vought, and I won't let you die at their hands. Sounds so heartwarming. The contractual version could be written even more disgustingly. Nora looked up at him, her eyes sweeping over the charred fabric on his left shoulder. That was the spot grazed by the edge of Homelander's heat vision. The fabric was stiff like burnt plastic, rubbing against his wound as he walked. She pulled out a printout and slapped it on top. Carl Pike, bone hardening ability user, marked as deceased on the list. 3 days ago, someone used his old medical insurance number to pick up painkillers. There are 2 others I can't confirm. You prioritize checking the survivors. The data on the dead belongs to me. Han Yu flipped to that page and pressed his finger over the name, Carl Pike. What do you want the data on the dead for? To dig Vought's grave. Just 5 words. The fluorescent light buzzed, and the bedside lamp flickered out for a beat. The analytical vision on Han Yu's wrist suddenly straightened, as if pulled by something from outside the window. A red dot swept across the curtains. Han Yu's body moved first. He clamped his hand onto Nora's shoulder and pressed her down toward the bed. Nora's curse had just reached her throat when the window glass shattered, shards and rainwater bursting into the room. Rat-tat-tat. The wall was riddled with a string of white holes, the printouts on the table flew up, and the laptop screen cracked with spiderweb patterns. Nora's back hit the edge of the bed, and she gasped in pain, but her hand had already found the keyboard. Vought drone. She gritted her teeth. Who else loves scanning with red dots so much? Han Yu half knelt in front of her, the low-level bio field pressed to its lowest power, a golden film clinging to the outside of his back and shoulders. 2 bullets struck, deflected, and ricocheted into the wardrobe, grazing the corner of the wall. Not thick enough. His old injury on his left shoulder was numb from the impact, and underneath the charred fabric, it burned with pain. Nora dragged the cracked screen laptop under the bed, her fingers typing rapidly. The window on the screen shook twice, then popped up a heat source map of the parking lot. She remotely cranked the old air conditioner in the empty room next door to the maximum and wrote the room's TV signal as a mobile heat source. Go to the next room, idiot. The drone's red dot paused at the edge of the curtain, seemingly hesitating for half a second, then slid toward the window next door. Han Yu grabbed the black bag and the list, and with his other hand, he grabbed Nora's wrist. The back window. My computer. Hold on tight. Can you give someone a second before you? Han Yu kicked open the small bathroom window, and the cold rain poured in. He threw the black bag out first, stepped onto the window frame, and reached back to pull Nora to his side. Nora held the broken laptop under one arm and gripped his coat tightly with the other. When the 2 of them landed on the rear awning, the tin roof made a dull thud. Han Yu slipped, his left shoulder hitting the edge of the wall. The edge of the burn was torn open, and blood flowed down with the rain into his sleeve. It hurt so much his teeth ached. A more intense round of gunfire came from the room next door, the TV exploded, and sparks flew from the outdoor air conditioner unit. Nora looked up and glanced over, her face turning a shade paler. Spare room. She shoved the key to Han Yu, end of the corridor, 209. Han Yu didn't ask how she even had a spare room. He flipped down from the edge of the awning, grabbed the drainpipe for leverage, and swung with her to the second-floor outer corridor. Nora staggered when she landed, her hand still gripping his sleeve, not letting go. The lock on 209 was pathetically old, the key turned twice before it opened. The room smelled of a mix of damp wood and disinfectant. Han Yu locked the door behind him, dragged a chair to prop against the door handle, and lifted the mattress to block the window. Nora placed the laptop on the small round table, The screen was cracked to the point of being unreadable, so she fished a spare cable from her bag and connected it to her phone. After tapping her fingers a few times, the image of the parking lot appeared. The drone was firing at the empty room next door, and the motel owner was huddled under the front desk, shivering. It can hold for another 3 minutes, she said. I'm feeding it a false alarm from a patrol car. Han Yu leaned against the wall, the black bag sliding to his feet. The charred fabric on his left shoulder stuck to the wound, and blood seeped out faster and faster, dripping down the back of his hand onto the carpet. Nora stared at the drop of blood, her brow knitting together. Sit down. Handle the drone first. I am handling it. Sit down, and don't drip blood in front of my computer. Han Yu glanced at her. Nora pulled a roll of gauze, alcohol swabs, and a small pair of surgical scissors from her bag. Her movements were practiced. She paused when the tip of the scissors touched the charred fabric. It will hurt. You could say something nice to distract me. Don't die in front of my computer, it's bad luck. Fine, that sounds nice enough. The scissors went snip. As the burnt stiff fabric was peeled away, Han Yu's fingers gripped the edge of the chair, and the wood creaked. Homelander's heat vision had only grazed the edge, but the burn had been torn open during their flight, with red and black mixed at the edges, and rainwater, dust, and blood all smeared over it. Nora's fingertips touched near the wound and paused for half a second. She didn't look up and pressed the alcohol swab onto it. Han Yu's back and shoulders tensed, and his breathing hitched for a beat. He hadn't been this flustered while dodging bullets or jumping across the awning, but with her head down pressing on his wound, her wet hair hanging down and the tips brushing against his wrist, the only sounds left in the room were the rain and the faint clicking of the keyboard running automatically. You're shaking, Nora said. Cold. Bullshit. Her words were cold, but her touch softened. She wrapped the gauze around in circles, tying the knot behind his shoulder, securing it firmly. Han Yu looked down at her hands. Her nails were very short, there were old calluses on the web between her thumb and index finger, and a thin scar on the side of her palm, likely from years of dismantling computer cases. This was a person who put a stun gun on the table, hid a spare room key at the bottom of her bag, and couldn't even be bothered to raise an eyebrow when cursing. Yet when the red dot swept across the curtain earlier, she hadn't pushed him away. Footsteps ran past outside the door, the motel owner was screaming in the corridor, and distant sirens were chopped up by the sound of the rain. Nora listened for a moment, then turned to grab her phone, her coat slipping off her shoulder, her soaked shirt clinging to her arm. Han Yu picked up the only relatively clean towel at the foot of the bed and draped it over her shoulders. Nora's movements stopped. What are you doing? You're shaking too. That's because I'm cold. She glared at him, pulled the towel tighter around her shoulders, and didn't throw it back. Han Yu refolded the list and stuffed it into the waterproof bag. The corner of the page with Carl Pike's name had been blurred by the rain, but the name was still clear. He wiped the water off the edge of the paper with his thumb. For the survivors on the list, we prioritize saving the living, he said. The data on the dead is yours, and I'll go after the locations of the living. Nora looked at him for a long moment, then reached out to take the temporary access card and tucked it into the compartment behind her phone. I'll open the line for the Osborne warehouse for 3 minutes for you. After 3 minutes, the thermal sensors will scan back. That's enough. You'd better hope it really is enough. She shoved the stun gun back into her sleeve and looked down to check the cracked laptop. I don't want to write an obituary for A19. Han Yu picked up the black bag, walked to the door, and placed his hand on the lock. The hero popularity value panel popped up new prompts at the edge of his vision. Nora Weir. Offline cooperation established. Compound V failure list. New survival targets added. Osborne outer warehouse remote line support, connected. The time on the phone jumped to 10:27. Nora brushed her wet hair behind her ear, the cold light of the screen illuminating her profile. She didn't smile again, just tossed the earpiece to Han Yu. South side cold chain door, before 11 o'clock, she said, don't use the main entrance, don't play the hero, and don't lose my list. Han Yu put the earpiece in his ear and looked back at her before opening the door. You're very demanding. If you think it's too much, give me back my towel. Han Yu glanced down at the towel on her shoulders and turned into the corridor. I owe you one. When the magnetic lock on the cold chain door on the south side of the Osborne peripheral warehouse clicked open, Han Yu was already pressed against the shadows of the shelves inside the door. Nora's lowered voice came through the earpiece, accompanied by background static and the faint clicking of her tapping on her phone screen. The line is cut. 3 minutes. I'm not responsible for anything less than a second. You really know how to encourage someone. Shut up, A19. There's a thermal blind spot behind the second row of freezers on the left. Don't look up, the scanner just swept past. Han Yu shifted the strap of his black bag to his right shoulder, avoiding the gauze on his left shoulder. The fabric brushed against the edge of the burn, making his teeth clench, but his feet didn't stop. The cold storage was piled high with metal crates bearing the Osborne logo, the box numbers covered by tape, the air thick with the smell of condensation and machine oil. The sound of wheels rolling over the floor came from the main warehouse in the distance. A row of high-powered lights shone above the cargo crates. Norman Osborn stood under the lights, his dark coat buttoned to the top, clutching a copy of a contract. The lawyer beside him held a folder like a shield, and 4 mercenaries were scattered around, guns pointed down, fingers hovering near the triggers. Harry Osborn stood half a step behind Norman, his suit jacket not yet buttoned. He looked like he wanted to ask something but swallowed the words, staring only at the 2 cryogenic containers that had just been delivered. Father, is this batch going through offshore accounts? Harry lowered his voice. The board of directors needs an explanation at the very least. Norman didn't turn back. You only need to learn how to see the price. The VAT representative smiled and adjusted his gloves. The shells of the 2 cryogenic containers he brought were frosted with white, and there were no VAT logos on the lids, only a thin blue seal. Mr. Osborn, this is the only path on the market for a stable compound V protocol. The VAT representative pushed the containers under the light. The feedback from the test group is beautiful. The collapse rate has dropped, neural rejection has decreased, and the host survival window has been extended. Beautiful. Norman flipped through the documents, his fingernails tapping on the paper. Your last, beautiful, cost me 2 levels of the experimental zone. Harry's expression changed. Experimental zone. Commercial acquisitions always have costs. Norman finally glanced at him. Don't wear that student face here. Han Yu crouched behind the freezer and pressed his small terminal against the outside of the container. The analytical vision traced along the edge of the cryogenic container, like fine threads drilling into the seams of the box. The next second, dense red text popped up in his field of vision. Sample. Black fluid, black core active cluster. Symbiote activity, abnormal. Radiation modification traces, high. Compound V adaptation response. Forced stabilization, backlash probability uncapped. Sentry energy spectrum response, captured. Han Yu's fingertips paused at the edge of the terminal. The thing inside the box moved. Through the alloy shell and the cryogenic layer, the shadow inside seemed to hear his heartbeat, moving close to the box wall, pressing against the direction where he was. The analytical vision was pushed back by a black pulse, then quickly converged into a net. In the earpiece, Nora's voice dropped a beat. Your data just spiked. The parser is screaming, the black core reaction value is hitting the ceiling. Han Yu, what did you touch? The cargo. Cut the crap, be specific. Cargo that can eat people. Nora cursed, the sound of her typing faltering for a beat. I can only see the external lines, I don't have access inside the box. Don't open it, just take the residue from the outer layer and leave. Han Yu pulled the sampling needle from his black bag. Just as he was about to touch the seal, a short alarm sounded from the side door. Beep. Very light. Harry looked up. Who's there? A mercenary immediately turned around, gun raised. Han Yu put away the sampling needle, his body pressing into the crevice of the shelving unit. His left shoulder was pressed against a sharp metal edge, and heat seeped out from under the gauze. Harry was a step faster than the mercenary. He grabbed a flashlight from the side and led 2 people around the freezer, his face showing the annoyance of someone who had been offended. Come out. Harry swept the flashlight over the shelves. The Osborne warehouse is closed tonight. Who sent you? Han Yu didn't move. When the flashlight beam reached the tips of his shoes, he raised his right hand, and a thin layer of golden film from his low-level biofield spread across his palm. As the first gun was raised, he flicked his finger, deflecting the barrel. The bullet pierced the condensation pipe above, spraying white mist all over the mercenary's face. The second gun was faster. Han Yu dodged to the side, his palm striking the opponent's wrist bone. With a click, the gun hit the floor and slid under the shelf. Harry stepped back half a step and swung the flashlight at Han Yu. Han Yu grabbed his wrist, not using much force, just pressing him behind the shelf. Harry's back hit a wooden crate, his breath caught, and his tie tilted to his shoulder. Don't go near those two cryogenic containers. Han Yu stared at him. Not if you understand. Harry gritted his teeth. What are you? A corporate spy? One of Vought's people? Or some lunatic raised by my father's competitors? I don't have time to teach you how to curse. You want to destroy Osborn. Han Yu glanced at the center of the main warehouse. The Vought representative had already noticed the commotion at the side door, and the mercenaries around Norman began to disperse. Big trouble. Norris spoke urgently in his earpiece. The thermal scan is early. Vought's field vehicle has deployed a jammer at the north door. 20-second countdown until your position is exposed. Retreat. Retreat even if you can't get the sample. Han Yu released Harry and shoved him further behind the shelves. Stay here. Harry stumbled 2 steps, his face flushed with anger. Just as he was about to rush out, the sound of the cryogenic container unlocking came from the main warehouse. Click. The blue seal split, and white mist poured out from the 4 corners of the lid. The Vought representative, wearing gloves, kept his tone steady. We will demonstrate a cryogenic awakening first. Mr. Osborn, please keep a distance of 2 meters. Norman didn't retreat. He stared into the box, his pupils narrowing, like he was looking at a piece of gold that could quote its own price. The moment the lid opened, the black fluid rolled along the transparent liner. It had no fixed shape, with fine patterns emerging on its surface, and every contraction made the light dim slightly. The walls of the liner were covered in dense impact marks, with scorch-like black spots on the inside. Han Yu's left shoulder jerked violently. The wound under the gauze felt like it had been pierced by an ice needle, and the sentry energy spectrum deep in his chest was tugged. At the edge of his vision, the analytical vision straightened crazily, all lines pointing to that mass of black fluid. Warning. Black core reaction locked onto host breach. Warning. The void dark projection contamination. Sentry seal. Stimulated. A shadow pressed down in front of his eyes. There was no sound, only a deep cold. The cold passed through his ribs, gripping his heart, as if someone were dragging his name out of his body. Han Yu's knees bent half an inch, his right hand pressing against the shelf, his knuckles turning white. An add-on. Bullshit. This thing is targeting him. Han Yu. Norris' voice exploded in his earpiece. Your heart rate dropped. What happened over there? Answer me. Han Yu's throat tightened. The black core is looking at me. Retreat. Retreat now. I'm opening the south door for you. 3, 2. Wait. Harry rushed out from behind the shelves. He probably only saw the Vought representative's glove tremble above the cryogenic container and saw that Norman was too close to the box. The young man's judgment was fueled by recklessness as he reached out to pull his father away. Father, get away from the box. The black fluid slammed into the transparent liner. The first time, the liner cracked like a spiderweb. The second time, the cryogenic container's alarm screamed. The Vought representative's face turned pale. Before he could press the close button, the third impact shattered the liner. Crash. The black fluid surged out from the box, stretching into a shadow along the ground, moving so fast that only blurs remained to the naked eye. It didn't pounce on the nearest Vought representative, nor did it pounce on Norman. It veered toward a bloody cut on the back of Harry's hand, caused by the corner of the box. Harry froze in place. Run. Han Yu roared. Harry looked back, his eyes full of shock. The shadow had already sprung up like an unfolded black net, lunging straight at his wrist. Han Yu's low-level biofield expanded, blocking it for only half a second. The black fluid pressed against the golden film, and the surface of the film immediately emitted a scorching cracking sound, like hot oil poured onto ice. Han Yu exerted force with his right shoulder, knocking Harry aside. Harry fell to the bottom of the shelf, hitting his forehead against a wooden crate, letting out a muffled grunt. The shadow lost its target, folded in midair, and lunged at Han Yu's left shoulder. Norris screamed in the earpiece, her voice cracking, "Don't take it with the wound. Han Yu, if you dare." Han Yu raised his left shoulder. The gauze was torn open by the black flow, the charred fabric and dried blood scabs flipping up together. The moment the cold tentacles drilled into his flesh, he gritted his teeth, but a short, muffled sound still squeezed out from his throat. His entire left arm felt like it had been dragged into a deep, cold well, and the blood around the wound was swallowed by the black patterns in one gulp. The cryogenic container alarms, the sound of mercenaries racking their guns, and Norman's angry shouting were all muffled as if separated by thick glass. In his field of vision, the hero heat value panel flashed prompts like crazy. Black core symbiosis. Abnormal access. Sentry seal. Stimulated. The void dark projection. Approaching. Han Yu gripped the edge of the shelf with his right hand, denting the metal. Harry lay a few steps away, looking up at him, his lips moving. The previous words, "Destroy Osborn," were stuck in his throat, unable to be spat out. The black patterns drilled deeper along Han Yu's left shoulder. In the earpiece, only Nora's trembling breathing remained. "Han Yu, answer me." He looked down at the blackness surging at the edge of his wound. Still alive. The next second, the sound of gun bolts cocking rang out simultaneously around the warehouse. Black veins crawled from Han Yu's left shoulder to the back of his hand, pulsing under his skin like charred blood vessels. He couldn't stand steady. His left knee slammed into the cement floor of the cold chain warehouse, his kneecap hitting with a dull thud. What was worse were his fingertips. His 5 fingers felt like they had been taken over by another set of nerves, and tiny black whiskers crept out from under his fingernails, probing along the ground and slithering toward the direction where Harry had fallen. "Han Yu," Nora's voice cracked in his earpiece, "cut it off. Do you hear me? Cut it off." Han Yu ripped off half of his tactical glove with his right hand and shoved it into his mouth to bite down. It hurt. The black core burrowed into his bone joints, cold as a dull blade, scraping upward from the wound bit by bit. The hero heat value panel at the edge of his vision was covered by black static, with prompts exploding row after row. Black core symbiosis. Abnormal access. The void dark side projection contamination. Active. Sentinel seal. Suppressing. Warning. Abnormal activity approaching the cervical nerve bundle. Han Yu's teeth squeaked against the glove leather, and he dug 2 fingers of his right hand into a crack in the floor, forcing his attention back to the panel. Analytical vision. Mark the boundary. Golden analytical marking lines lit up on his left arm, flickering twice before managing to cling to the edge of the black veins on the 3rd attempt. The line circled all the way to the junction of his shoulder and neck, drawing a dangerous red zone below his collarbone. Any further up, and it would be his brainstem. Stop right there. He slammed his left arm against the ground. The black whiskers were shaken back half an inch, but immediately sprang out from his fingertips again, like insects that had smelled blood. A low, hoarse gasp squeezed out of Han Yu's throat as his right hand grabbed his left wrist, and a low-level biofield spread out a thin golden film, forcibly pressing that mass of black activity within the range of his arm. Bang! The first shot shattered the glass of the freezer cabinet behind him. Vought security reacted the fastest. 2 black armored security guards poked their gun barrels out from behind the cargo crates on the east side, red dots aiming at Han Yu's chest. The captain roared in the comms. "Sample is out of control, clear the area. Neutralize all living targets on site." The Osborn mercenaries also exploded. He stole the goods. Protect the young master. Gun barrels on both sides were raised simultaneously, and the warehouse instantly turned into a pot of boiling water. Bullets grazed past the cryogenic boxes, blue-white cold mist sprayed from the ruptured pipes, and the metal shelves rattled with a clanging sound. Harry braced himself against a wooden crate, trying to climb up, blood from his forehead streaming down his brow bone. Just as he looked up, he saw a row of bullet holes exploding right by his feet. "Get down." Han Yu pounced over, his right arm locking onto Harry's shoulder, dragging him as they rolled toward a forklift nearby. The two collided behind the wheels, and Harry's back slammed into the steel frame, causing him to curse in pain. "Are you crazy? Let me go." Han Yu had no time to retort. 4 bullets drilled through the gaps in the forklift, the angle so tricky it was as if they were waiting for them to land there. Han Yu blocked in front of Harry's face with his left arm, and the black tentacles sprang out on their own, a thin layer of black film spreading over his skin. PFF'd, PFFT, PFFT, PFFT. The bullet heads slammed in and didn't bounce off. The black film swallowed the 4 bullet heads into its surface, like asphalt wrapping around pebbles, 4 small bulges rising on the surface before quickly flattening out again. Han Yu's left arm sank, the black veins lit up, and the swallowed metal disappeared as if ground into powder. Harry's expression changed. The Osborn bodyguards who were just holding their guns also paused for a beat, someone cursing in a low voice, "What the hell is that thing?" Han Yu shook his numb hand, the black whiskers coiled into thin threads along the back of his hand, wanting to probe toward Harry again. He pressed down on his left arm, his knuckles turning white. "Don't just watch," Han Yu said, his words slurred while biting the glove, before spitting the glove aside. "If you want to live, stay pressed against the forklift." Harry was panting, his eyes still hard, but his hand was already reaching for the phone in his pocket. Han Yu pressed down on his wrist. What are you doing? Contacting my father. Harry lowered his voice. He can mobilize people, he can. The warehouse signal has been hijacked by VOT security. Han Yu turned his phone screen over. Next to the full signal bars, an unfamiliar transfer code was jumping. If you dial out now, Norman's location, backup lines, and security frequencies will all end up in VOT security's backend. Harry's fingers froze. Gunshots exploded overhead. The forklift cockpit glass shattered into white fragments. Harry stared at that string of transfer codes, his lips moving. How did you know? I've cleaned up similar messes for them before. Who exactly are you? Han Yu glanced at him, the black veins on his left arm still surging outward, the golden analytical marking lines firmly locking the shoulder-neck boundary. Asking that now is very Osborne style. After cursing, Harry actually put his phone away. A harsh static came through the earpiece. Nora forced the channel back open, her speech so fast it was like chasing a train. I've entered the fire suppression system. The west side sprinkler valve is jammed, and the east side has been locked by VOT security. Give me 10 seconds. No, 8 seconds. There's a backup terminal in the cryogenic zone to your left. It contains a data package, Compound V project data, disguised under the file name, Cold Chain Records. Han Yu took a look while pressed against the bottom of the forklift. The cryogenic zone was separated by 2 rows of shelves, with crossfire in between. VOT security was using short bursts, while the Osborne mercenaries had fiercer firepower. 2 workers on the south side were terrified and lying on the ground. One of them had been shot in the calf, blood dragging out a dark trail. 8 seconds is too long. Shut up, I'm already as fast as I can be. The sprinkler heads overhead clicked. The next moment, white mist sprayed wildly from the fire pipes. The cryogenic warehouse was already cold, and the mist spread as soon as it hit the ground, blurring figures half a meter away into gray shapes. Nora fed a string of fake feedback into the VOT security thermal goggles, and the captain's irritable cursing came through the channel. Heat source lost. Switch to manual. Don't shoot the young master. The Osborne side was also roaring. Left flank, push up, push up. Han Yu grabbed Harry by the back of his collar and shoved him deeper behind the forklift. Stay here. Where are you going? To get the ledger. Han Yu dashed out, body arched. The black core seemed to smell the scent of the battlefield. The tentacles on his left arm opened uncontrollably toward the gunfire. Several stray bullets slammed into him, only to be swallowed by the black film, bringing a sensation like needle pricks, a sense of pleasure. He almost stopped. That thing liked bullets. It wasn't just blocking them, it was eating the firepower. Han Yu, don't let it get too high off it. Nora shouted in the earpiece, your heart rate is dropping, your body temperature is dropping, you're like a running piece of ice, damn it. Well cursed, I'll put that in the report next time. Stop fooling around. Han Yu swept past the first row of freezers, his right hand swiping a pistol that had fallen on the ground, and he used the butt of the gun to smash open the casing of the backup terminal. The golden analytical marking lines attached to the interface, Nora took over immediately, and the screen flashed wildly with black and white text. Compound V project data. Black fluid compatibility rate. Minor group 87%, adult group in experimentation. VOT joint test batch, B17 to B23. Pack it up, Han Yu said. Already downloading, 27 seconds. Give me the 10-second version. Do you think I'm a magic user? You or Nora? There was a half-beat pause on the other end of the earpiece, and the sound of typing grew denser. Han Yu reached his left hand into the freezer. A thumb-sized sample of the black core was sealed in a transparent cold chain box, the walls of the box covered in frost patterns. As soon as he touched it, the black whiskers on his left arm lunged forward, as if wanting to drag the residue directly into his body. He pressed down on the box lid with his right hand, pressing his palm down until it hurt. Behave. The black whiskers twisted twice on the surface of the box before retreating back into his fingertips. Han Yu shoved the cold chain box into his inner chest pocket and pulled out the solid-state storage drive next to the terminal. Gains secured. A scream came from outside the cryogenic zone. The worker who had been shot earlier had crawled a few steps, terrified by stray bullets, and huddled next to the conveyor belt, the pool of blood beneath him growing larger. VOT security's gun barrel swept over, not stopping at all. Han Yu looked back. Don't get involved. Nora's voice was tight. you have the sample and the data now, don't look back, Han Yu. Han Yu's left arm had already swung out. The black tentacles swept along the ground, wrapping around the worker's belt and the hem of his work clothes, yanking him backward violently. The worker screamed as he slid across the floor, bullets chasing behind him and sparking. The tentacles dragged him to the edge of the safety exit door, and casually rolled up a fallen fire blanket to cover his legs. Press the wound. Han Yu kicked a roll of tape over. Can you do it? The worker's teeth chattered. I can a little. Then don't die. He turned around and retreated toward the forklift. In the white mist, Harry was half kneeling, clutching a pistol he had picked up from beside a fallen bodyguard, the muzzle shaking, but he kept it aimed at the VOT security guards approaching the forklift. When Han Yu rushed back, one security guard had already circled to Harry's side and rear. Harry didn't see him. Han Yu raised his left arm, the black film swallowing the 2 bullets fired at him, and his right hand picked up an empty magazine from the ground and threw it. The magazine hit the security guard's goggles dead on, shattering them with a crack. Harry reacted, gritted his teeth, pulled the trigger, and forced the man back behind the shelves. I could have run just now. Han Yu pressed back against the forklift, his breathing low. Harry's hand holding the gun was still shaking, his gaze falling on the layer of black veins on his left arm, then shifting to the worker who had just been dragged away. You didn't run. Yeah, why? Han Yu pulled at the cuff stuck by the black whiskers, looking down at the shoulder-neck boundary. The golden marking lines were still there, the black veins trapped, only half a finger's width left from the red zone. Because the way you look when you owe me money is more pleasing to the eye. Harry froze for a moment, the corner of his mouth twitching, but he quickly pressed it back down. Osborn will pay it back. Stay alive first. Deep in the white mist, the VOT security channel suddenly became quiet. Too quiet. Han Yu frowned. In the second-floor monitoring room of the warehouse, Norman Osborn stood before a row of screens, his face still stained with water droplets splashed from the ruptured freezer earlier. The surveillance footage was intermittent due to the mist, but the clips of Han Yu's left arm swallowing bullets, dragging away the wounded, and suppressing the black core boundary were clearly projected onto the main screen after being automatically enhanced by the system. The assistant stood behind him, his voice dry. Sir, young Master Harry is still alive. A-19 saved him. Norman didn't look at Harry. His gaze was fixed on the golden analytical marking lines on Han Yu's arm, his pupils tightening bit by bit, then brightening. Replay the third segment. Sir, replay. Norman's fingers pressed against the edge of the console, the black core didn't consume him. He is restraining it. On the screen, Han Yu was kneeling on one knee, using his bio-force field and analytical marking lines to block the upward movement of the black veins. The black core was like a beast with its neck being held down, struggling, but failing to cross the shoulder-neck red zone. Norman's breathing grew heavier. Back up all the footage. Multiple angles, raw data, thermal spectrum, biological reactions, I want it all. The assistant hesitated. What about young Master Harry? Send Team B to provide support. Norman's eyes remained on the screen. Don't record the rescue credit for A-19. Raise A-19's priority. Leave a clean sample slot for the laboratory. The assistant swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing, and lowered his head to operate the controls. On another screen, VOT's external access indicator flashed twice, and the abnormal energy readings were automatically packed and transmitted along an encrypted line to the incident response port of the 7 tower. In the warehouse, Han Yu's earpiece suddenly crackled. Nora's voice lowered. Bad news. VOT security sent the energy report out, and the recipient has very high clearance. Han Yu pressed the cold chain box into his inner pocket, the black whiskers on his left arm rising and falling silently amidst the sound of gunfire. Harry leaned behind him, for the first time not aiming his gun at him. How high? Nora paused for half a second. The 7 tower, high-risk response. The port has been transferred to Homelander's clearance. Han Yu looked up, toward the red warning lights still flashing deep in the mist. Fine then. He pushed Harry half a step behind him, the black veins on his left arm surging against the golden boundary, as if wanting to swallow all the gunfire in the entire warehouse. At the same time, on the top floor of the 7 tower, the high-risk response port lit up with a red glow. Homelander finished reading the abnormal energy readings, his gaze lingering on the line that read, Osborn Cold Chain Warehouse. I'll go myself. When the broadcast started, Han Yu was dragging Harry from beside a collapsed shelf. A piercing static noise drowned out the gunfire, followed by a female voice squeezing out from the old speakers on the warehouse ceiling, as cold as a machine misreading human life. Contamination spread confirmed in Zone C, Zone D, and the main cold chain warehouse. Sealing procedure initiated. The first steel door slammed down. Boom. 20 meters away, an Osborn mercenary had just rushed to the door when half his gun barrel was crushed into an iron pancake. He fell backward, his shoulder hitting a forklift, cursed, and as he crawled halfway up, he was forced back to the ground by VOT security fire sweeping down from above. The second, the third, workers deep in the warehouse screamed. Some ran back clutching file boxes, others knelt on the ground picking up broken walkie-talkies. Cold air, smoke, and the smell of gunpowder mingled together, while blue condensation liquid flowed along the drainage grooves on the ground like a snake about to freeze. Han Yu looked up at the broadcast. No survivor protocol entering pre-execution. Cargo and eyewitness units to be cleared simultaneously. Harry's face went pale instantly. Are they crazy? This shipment has Osborn clearance. My father. Shut up. Han Yu pressed the cold chain box tightly into his inner pocket. The old wound on his left shoulder, raised by heat vision, split open again, and hot blood seeped out from under the gauze. Black veins pushed out against his skin, as if something wanted to raise its head from the wound. VOT would even throw their partners into an incinerator. He noted this debt. On the other side of the warehouse, 2 bodyguards wearing Osborn tactical vests were shielding a worker with a gunshot wound to the leg as they hid behind a pillar. Han Yu grabbed Harry and pushed him over. Take him. West side fire escape. There's a manual lever in the B2 maintenance mezzanine. Once you pass the lever, don't look back. The bodyguard froze. Young master. I'm not leaving. Harry shook off the bodyguard, his eyes red-rimmed. Norman is still in the surveillance room. I have to find him. He can definitely shut it off. Han Yu turned, grabbed his collar, and pressed him directly against a cargo crate. Bang! Harry let out a muffled groan as his back hit the crate, and as he raised his hand, he locked eyes with Han Yu. Those eyes were dark and heavy, with analytical vision floating at the edges of his pupils like a sharp ruler. If you die here, your father will only use your corpse to sign a more expensive contract. Harry opened his mouth. You're lying. Fine. Han Yu's fingers tightened, crinkling his collar. Then stay. Wait for VOT to burn you to ashes, and then wait for Norman to throw you a funeral with a nice stock price. The bodyguards reacted, grabbing Harry on both sides. Let go of me. Han Yu, you. West side. Han Yu pushed Harry into their arms, his voice very low. Him being alive is still useful to me. Harry's cursing cut off, the color rushing to his face before draining away. He stared at Han Yu, as if wanting to chew these words to pieces. The bodyguards didn't waste any more breath, dragging him into the smoke. The fourth steel door dropped, leaving a gap less than half a person wide in the west passageway. Hurry! Han Yu rushed over, pressing his right hand against the edge of the steel door. Analytical vision crawled over the door hinge, and several stress points lit up. Just as he was about to exert force, the black core behind him moved first. There was too much killing intent. The cold commands from the broadcast, the locking sound of the ceiling rail guns, the breathing of the VOT security personnel pulling their triggers in the distance, all of it pierced into the black veins like needles. Han Yu's back stiffened abruptly, and the sound of fabric tearing came from below his left shoulder. RRRRIP. A translucent black wing membrane pushed out from behind his shoulder blades, its edges like smoke-stained glass, thin, yet contracting like a living thing. Dozens of black tentacles drilled out along his arms, twisting into thick ropes, and snapped against the steel door gap. The steel door emitted an awful, twisting sound. An injured mercenary watched in a daze, the magazine in his hand dropping to the ground. Han Yu gritted his teeth, his right foot stepping into the condensation liquid, and the black tentacles drilled into the internal lock along the door gap. Analytical vision provided the break points, and the black core tore directly. Click, click, click. The entire steel door was pulled, bulging outward, the door hinge flew off, grazing a worker's ear and embedding itself into the wall. The worker was so terrified he covered his head and lay down, and the next second, the gap was forced wide open by the black ropes. Get out. No one moved. They looked at the wing membrane behind Han Yu, at the black tissue swimming on his arms, their eyes filled with instinctive retreat. 2 mercenaries lowered their guns and raised them again. Halfway up, seeing the blood on Han Yu's chest and his posture guarding the gap, their fingers moved away from the triggers. If you want to live, get out. Han Yu roared. I'm counting to 3. This worked. The first worker scrambled through the gap, followed by the second. The leg-injured mercenary was carried out by his companion. He paused for half a beat when passing Han Yu, his face still covered in dust. Duh, thanks. Cut the crap. Han Yu waved his hand to clear a fallen cable, and the black tentacles coiled around the cable end and whipped it toward the ceiling rail gun. Electric sparks exploded, briefly illuminating his back. The wing membrane spread out another section, like a black skeleton growing out of the smoke. Nora's rapid typing came through the earpiece. Switching external view to you. A compressed screen popped up on the left side of Han Yu's vision. In the night sky outside the warehouse, a small gold-red dot was flying in from the direction of the city, its speed so high that the camera automatically lost focus. Below the screen, Nora marked it 3 times with red frames, each one larger than the last. Homelander. 2 minutes at most, conservative estimate. Han Yu's Adam's apple bobbed. His throat was full of the taste of smoke. Nora, pull out of the line. The typing on the other end stopped for half a beat. Say that again. Vought has already entered the high-risk response port. If you keep suppressing the surveillance, you'll get bitten back. Break the chain and get out. Stop planning my funeral. Nora's voice exploded, raspy from staying up late. Get yourself out of that tin can warehouse before you teach me how to survive, A19. Nora, don't. Nora, me. She interrupted him. I'm burning their surveillance cache and opening the rooftop fire door for you. Also, I fed the East Side drone 30 seconds of fake footage. 30 seconds, get it? Han Yu raised his hand to wipe the blood from his chin, his lips twitching, very short, very quick. Got it. Answer me alive. I'll try. Bullshit. Give me something accurate. Han Yu didn't respond. He turned and rushed back into the main warehouse. The last 3 survivors were trapped at the second-floor stairwell, an Osborn worker, a Vought outsourced driver, and the mercenary who had dropped his magazine earlier. Below the stairs, tongues of fire licked at plastic pallets, and thick smoke poured upward, almost forcing them over the railing. Jump! Han Yu shouted. The worker looked down and his legs went weak, causing him to kneel. It's too high. Black tentacles behind Han Yu coiled around the railing, and he used the leverage to launch himself up, his toes stepping across a broken shelf. Black Wing couldn't fly, but it opened in the smoke, shielding him from the debris sweeping across. He grabbed the worker's wrist and threw him toward the stack of thermal boxes below. A low-level biofield spread a layer of golden film at the landing point. The worker slammed onto it, rolled twice, and didn't break any bones. Next, the driver was clutching a waterproof document bag, refusing to let go no matter what. Han Yu saw the Osborn shipping manifest and a few pages of sign-off sheets peeking out of the bag's opening, and his eyes narrowed. Give me the bag, and jump. The driver trembled. Is this evidence? Life is worth more than paper. The driver threw the document bag down, closed his eyes, and flipped over the railing. Han Yu used the black tentacles to coil around his waist, absorbing some of the force on the way down. The mercenary was the last one. He had been shot in the shoulder, and when he jumped, he hit the edge of a shelf and cursed foully. Can you still run? Yes. SSS. Yes. Then run. Nora's voice slipped back into his earpiece. The rooftop fire door is open, but the elevator shaft is sealed. Take the northwest maintenance ladder. Hurry. Homelander is within 3 kilometers. Han Yu looked up. A low vibration came from the warehouse ceiling. The 5th and 6th steel doors slammed shut, and the entire cold chain warehouse was sealed like a steel coffin. The ventilation system began blowing back white mist, the mist carrying a pungent chemical smell. Vought didn't even have the patience to collect the bodies. He shoved the document bag into the side layer of his black bag, confirmed the cold chain box was still in his inner pocket, scooped up the solid-state storage stick from the ground with his left hand, and shoved it into the layer of his wrist guard. The gains were secured. The price was also screaming in his body. Every time the black core wing membrane expanded, his heart felt like it was being gripped by cold fingers, and the whispers of the void's dark side projection crawled against his eardrums, intermittent, urging him to drag everyone who had locked the doors back and tear them apart. Han Yu bit his tongue until it bled. The taste of blood suppressed the cold. Go to the northwest corner. He herded the 3 survivors forward. Keep your heads down, don't look back. The maintenance ladder was incredibly narrow, the iron plates warped by explosions, and the handrails were scalding hot. The black tentacles coiled around the railing, and Han Yu practically dragged the 3 people upward. Below, VOT security personnel pursued to the doorway. Just as their gun barrels poked into the smoke, Han Yu turned and whipped them. The black ropes lashed out. The gun barrels bent into twists, slamming back against the wall along with the shooters' arm guards. The screams were cut off by the steel doors, leaving only a muffled sound. Is he really A-19? The mercenary panted. The files said failed experiments never lived past. You talk too much. The mercenary shut up. Han Yu kicked the rooftop fire door open. The night wind poured in, carrying the cold from the city's heights, pulling the smoke and the smell of blood off him. The 3 survivors rushed out the door, kneeling beside the rooftop exhaust fans, coughing heavily. On the fire escape of another building in the distance, Harry was being dragged down by 2 bodyguards, still looking back. Han Yu stood at the doorway, the black wing membrane finally fully spread. It spanned across the smoke, the edges of the membrane tattered, but inside, fine, golden, thread-like analytical vision flashed by. The black core wanted to expand, but the sentinel seal pressed it tightly outside the red zone of his shoulders and back. The 2 forces pulled at each other on either side of his spine, making his knuckles turn white with pain. Norris' external view filled a corner of his vision. The gold-red figure had already passed the last row of high rises, his cape pulled straight by the high-speed airflow. Homelander's face became clearer and clearer in the lens. The smile he usually wore for the cameras was gone, his lips pressed into a cold line, and the red light in his eyes seemed to burn through the screen even from that distance. Norris' breathing leaked out from the earpiece. Han Yu. Divert the survivors' vehicles. He watched the gold-red figure, raising his hand to press the earpiece tighter. Cut the surveillance 3 streets away. What about you? Han Yu pressed the document bag and the cold chain box into his chest, and the black wing gave a violent flap in the night wind, the smoke dispersing from the edge of the wing membrane. I'm going to show him something new. In the distance, Homelander's speed increased by another notch. The sheet metal of the rooftop exhaust fans began to vibrate.
Thanks for watching my video. Please like and share it.